His hand passed through Varian's hand and Kyle swiftly realized that the one in front of him was only a hologram. So, he calmed down immediately and searched for Maya. After seeing that she was all right, he calmed down and raised a brow at the hologram. "Are you really Varian?" he asked with a bit of caution. Everything was all too sudden. Even though his mother assured him, Kyle still felt everything was unbelievable. "If I say no, will you build me another tomb and write some crazy shit on it?" Varian rubbed his fists and asked with a menacing smile. Haha. It's really you." Kyle laughed. "If it was your real self instead, I'd have confirmed with a glance." "If it was his real self, he'd have beat you up," Maya added from the side. "For bullying me, of course." "That is of course." Varian nodded. "You betray your brother for a girl?" Kyle said with a shocked expression. Varian slightly signaled to Sarah and the trio caught up with each other. Sarah understood what he meant and walked to Enigma's room. She knocked on the door a few times and it slowly opened. In the small but sleek and tidy room, Sarah saw Enigma gazing into the space. Sarah didn't know Enigma enough to understand that she was distracted. But she could sense the depressing atmosphere in the room. She must be blaming herself. Sarah narrowed her eyes. To be fair, she didn't like Enigma's outburst. The way she pressured her didn't help out either. But from Enigma's side, she was just trying to protect the relationship of a person close to her. Considering what Varian told her about Enigma's nature, the fact that she withdrew from the argument was itself a concession. Sarah looked at Enigma's back and was about to call her when an indifferent, but the shaky voice sounded. I am sorry for my behavior." "Huh?" Sarah nearly flinched at the unexpected words. Was this really the leader of Shadow Guardians? The legendary woman wreaked havoc even in the demon abyss. Sarah opened her mouth in shock and for a moment, forgot to respond. Enigma took that as Sarah still being angry, understandably so. "So," she continued. "Unless Sia asks me herself, you guys are free to do whatever you want." She emphasized the first part strongly while the latter part was filled with a mix of helplessness and acceptance. "I hope we never stand against each other," Sarah responded. Even though she was slightly displeased at Enigma's initial behavior, most of her anger subsided. Of course, if it was any other person, even if they apologized, Sarah wouldn't have let them off easily. But since the circumstances were different, taking the big picture into consideration, Sarah dropped any words that could prolong the conflict. "If you're really remorseful, apologize to the two," she said lightly. Enigma nodded and walked out without another word. Sarah was about to follow her out when she noticed the traces of blood on the window. With a sigh, she shook her head and left the room. "And I know this is inconvenient. But please bear with it for now. We'll figure out a solution," Varian said to his friends. Seeing Sarah and Enigma return, he waved his hand and signaled for them to be seated. Of the 4 couches, Varian and Sarah sat opposite each other while Enigma was opposite Kyle and Maya. An awkward silence ensued as Kyle and Maya tried to avoid Enigma's gaze. "I apologize," Enigma said lightly, startling everyone except Sarah. Varian squinted his eyes and wondered if it was still the same Enigma. "Nah, a patrol team tried to track us down a few minutes ago. She is the real deal," he reasoned. "I hope it doesn't happen again," Kyle said and shrugged. "Or I will die a really pointless death." "What's a pointful death?" Maya poked him lightly. "Let's see, a death in the lab is always better." Varian shook his head and turned to Enigma. "I have a few samples of the potion. Can you check them and see if there's anything off?" He waved his hand and the samples that just reached the spaceship were pulled in. Whoosh! 3 glass vials with a blue liquid floated in front of Enigma. "Gamma potion," Kyle exclaimed. Earlier, Varian told them that his joining the expo was purely to kidnap Dr. Thomas. It seemed like Gamma potion was an added bonus. Enigma stared at the potion samples intensely and gnashed her teeth. "I'll check them thoroughly." Her disgust was hard to hide. After all, this was something Xanders came up with from Sia. Since they didn't have her as the main resource provider, they could only experiment with other sources. Enigma was confident that whatever alternative they found, it could only be terrible. After all, good things didn't come for free. Especially, potions that could shake the foundations of civilization. If Gamma Potion could be made without any significant limitation, then it'd only mean that humanity reached a height that it could comfortably crush abyssals. It'd take at least a few decades. Enigma sighed and walked away with the potion samples. Aren't you going to say a few words? Sarah nudged him. Varian shrugged. Truth be told, he was really pissed off when he saw Kyle and Maya's conditions. Fortunately, nothing happened to them. If something irreversible did happen. Varian exhaled and erased the dangerous thoughts in his mind. Hey! Boo sent a few videos. Sarah exclaimed and tapped her comm. 2 videos started to play. The first was a desolate coast from where Kyle and Maya were escorted. It was now locked off by the army. The second was rather secretive. A few High Awakeners in the Defense Academy sneaked into the Amethyst community and breached Sarah's residence. Kyle, Maya, and Sarah were completely taken aback. Only then did the weight of Varian's actions begin to settle in. They were really saved from a horrible future. Then why? Blue Flash leaned forward in doubt. Understanding something and being comfortable with it aren't the same things. He raised his hands and said. He needed some time to let Enigma's actions cool down in his mind. Blue Flash looked at Varian's eyes and decided he wasn't lying. With a sigh, she shook her head. Just know that Enigma was ready to risk her life for Varian stood up and stared out of the window. Let's settle the business at hand first. I wonder how you'd react if I died. Blue Flash covered her mouth and chuckled. Better we never find out. Varian laughed. Ghost ship streaked past the Earth's space defenses. The space stations, the space patrol, and even the most sophisticated radars failed to detect the ghost ship's arrival. Once it was in the Earth's atmosphere, ghost ship increased its stealth and thus, reduced its speed. Then, it started to circle the Earth. Whoosh! 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 With Boo's space radar working at full capacity, the secret realms were detected one by one. Since Boo had already done such activity once in the past, it was much easier this time. Within an hour, Boo already found the target. Within that hour, Varian received Enigma's report on the Gamma Potion. While I'm no expert in this field, this potion's fundamental structure is identical to the one made by Roxana, Alpha Potion. Miracle Potion itself is a superior version of said Alpha Potion. Gamma Potion is made of nearly the same ingredients but its quality is several grades lower. The main component, Sia's blood infused with her auras, is missing in this potion. It is replaced by something, I'm not sure. This new ingredient is also the most important one. But from my observation, this ingredient, combined with others, can have a devastating long-term impact. Not a positive conclusion. I expected nothing less from the Xanders. Varian sneered. Since they passed the safety review, the dangers cannot be found by normal methods. Blue Flash opined. Even though Varian didn't like the Xanders, he agreed. Enigma knows what she knows because of Sia's blood and Roxana. Her genius is still haunting us, Well, if we can find someone of her caliber, we can show the problems in the potion to the world. Blue Flash shrugged helplessly. Roxana was one of a kind. There were no equals to her in this generation. Actually, we do have a guy. Varian snapped his fingers and a chained figure came into view. The thin man was bleeding from all over as sharp objects, nails, bolts, knives, swords, and spears remained impaled in his body. Dr. Thomas. Blue Flash said in a complicated emotion. Woo! Woo! The once famous doctor merely struggled for a few seconds before his eyes turned blank. Varian turned around and raised his hand. Pa! Thomas's face burnt up with stinging pain as he spat out a mouthful of blood and teeth. Can this piece of shit be of any help? Whether I like it or not, he's a top scientist after all. Varian asked with a sadistic expression. Blue Flash felt a shiver down her spine. By the time she reached Ghost Ship, Dr. Thomas was already fully serviced. It wasn't the torture that bothered her. As an Athena agent and Shadow Guardian's deputy leader, she had seen worse. It was the casual attitude with which Varian dealt with it that irked her. If she wasn't sure that Varian was on humanity's side, she'd have attacked him at any cost. Because such a person would become a nightmare to his enemies. He can't help. His specialty isn't in potion making. Blue Flash said in a dry voice. Oh, right. Varian sighed in disappointment and snapped his finger. Jerchich. A lightning blade pierced into Dr. Thomas's shoulder and electrocuted him, withdrawing just before he could suffer irreversible damage. Blue Flash watched his actions in silence. She felt that Varian knew Thomas couldn't help, yet he asked her. Was it because he wants to confirm? No, he just wanted an excuse. Blue Flash understood when she saw Varian's chilly smile. Unaware of her thoughts, Varian opened a holographic map and pointed to a moving location. This secret realm is the stronghold of Gamma Potions. We infiltrate it and get this crucial ingredient they replaced Sia's blood with. He reiterated the mission's plan. Blue Flash nodded. There are level 9s in it. It's a risky mission. Varian stressed the word risky. After the near-deaths in both Pluto and Expo, he was more sensitive to the risks than ever. Blue Flash puffed out her chest and said. Don't worry, escaping is my strong suit. Varian fell silent for a moment before nodding. Good. Master, we're entering the secret realm. The world around Ghost Ship flashed before the sky changed. A large landscape spanning hundreds of miles came into view. There were small blue blocks spread across the land. As they neared them, they could see that each blue block was a building. The block had 100 floors and was about half a mile in radius. Each such block occupied dozens of miles in radius and the whole secret realm was covered by a few dozen blocks. So, this is the brains of Xanders, huh? Varian smirked and his lips curled up. It'll be history soon. What are you thinking of doing? Blue Flash asked in worry. You can't kill them. Haha, Varian simply laughed in response. Slowly, Ghost Ship reached one of the blue blocks. Boo, take control, Varian said, and in a few seconds, the entire secret realm was under Boo's control. Then he finally turned to Blue Flash. Find the final ingredient. I have a hunch it'll be important. Blue Flash nodded. SHR. With a creak, the Ghost Ship's door opened and Blue Flash teleported into the building. Varian held his breath and waited eagerly. This was the final step to reverse everything. Well, they were teammates once after all. Varian mused as the pressure on his shoulders fell. Everyone is safe. Now, there's only one thing to focus on. He looked out of the window and his gaze seemed to pierce through the large building and spot the hidden figure. Blue Flash. Blue Flash stealthily teleported into the most important building, which ironically was identified by Boo because it had the most advanced security systems. With Boo disabling the security systems, Blue Flash only had to take care to be not found by the security forces. When it came to maneuvering against living creatures, Athena agents were second to none. Once she got into the building, Blue Flash tapped a ring on her and she disappeared. No one could see her or smell her scent. For the weak awakeners without a terrific perception, it was more than enough. However, Blue Flash maintained her caution. Whenever a person was about to pass by her, she'd use her space powers and disappear for a small period before appearing in a secure location. From the ground floor to the first floor, the second floor. Soon, the inevitable arrived. She avoided the mid-awakeners barely until she finally encountered the high awakeners. From here, something seemed to change in her. It wasn't clear what changed, but her progress in climbing to the top floor was unchanged. Varian watched this from a hologram and silently marveled at her skill. There were various stories, almost urban legends about these agents that operated in the dark. Varian used to think they were exaggerations by the populace. But now, he accepted that they were in fact downplaying the real capabilities of the Athena group. Whoosh! Whoosh! Blue flash appeared on the 7th floor and glanced at the small device on her finger. This was the most crucial part of her mission. If I fail. The faces of her loyal followers flashed in her mind along with the faces of selfless shadow guardians. Then, the scenes of their deaths seemed to play before her. Her focus shook ever so slightly before she controlled herself again. Huh. A level 7 guard on the floor frowned. What happened? The guard next to him questioned while taking a defensive stance. They were guarding a sensitive facility beside him for a moment. It was a large room covered by blue glass. Inside it, several herbs were subjected to a high aura concentration in extreme physical conditions before turning into a solution. If a slight slip-up occurred, the whole floor would blow up. So, the guards were extremely cautious. Did you feel anything? The first guard frowned. Nope. The alarm systems aren't showing any warnings as well. The second guard showed the readings. Let me check. Shaking his head in suspicion, the first guard closed his eyes and focused his fire sense. SCZ, SCZ. Like a water wave flooding an empty crater, his fire sense filled the room. As a high awakener, he could detect even the tiniest of aura fluctuations. Just like breathing, every awakener would give out aura fluctuations. She's there. Varian watched, rather nervously, as blue flash stopped in her tracks on the floor. The fire sense passed through her and she remained frozen like a statue. A few moments passed and the guard finally opened his eyes. Yeah, my bad. SZZZ, blue flash sneaked into the upper floor. She's a pro. Varian sighed. In fact, he wanted to sneak up to at least the top floor through the ghost ship. But since High Awakeners heavily guarded this place, Boo wasn't sure if they could escape the senses of a level 9. Of course, if Boo reduced its size and moved very slowly, there should be no problem passing through most locations. The only problem was that even if they could hide from level 9, they couldn't enter the lab on the top floor. It'd always be under the strict sense of the level 9 guards. If they still try to get in, they could be caught. After what happened in Pluto and more recently with Julius, Varian was a bit wary of such risks. He even wondered if there were treasures in the lab like in Pluto that could resist Boo. But even if the lab had treasures against Boo or not, breaking into the top floor's lab, which wasn't connected to any electronic system, was impossible for Ghost Ship. To be clear, this was probably the second most secure location he was trying to breach in. The first was naturally Pluto's. Thus, when he was in a dilemma planning this mission, Blue Flash proposed another plan. She'd use a stealth treasure, a hybrid of the treasures that made you invisible and hid your smell and others. These treasures could easily be bought with enough money. He was initially hesitant. You couldn't escape the detection of a High Awakener just with those treasures. Their senses detected the minuscule but almost continuous aura fluctuations. No living being was exempt from that property. But like breathing, aura fluctuations could also be suppressed and hidden even from High Awakeners. Suppressing the aura fluctuations from even a level 9 was, however, a Herculean task. Not so surprisingly, as the deputy captain of Athena's Earth branch, Blue Flash happened to be one of those stealth monsters. Thus, combining Boo's hacking, a very powerful stealth treasure, and her terrific aura control accomplishments, Blue Flash managed to sneak into one of the most secured structures of the Federation. Of course, if humanity improved their technology so that Bo couldn't hack them, she'd have zero chance of succeeding. For instance, despite her expertise, Blue Flash couldn't sneak into the heavily guarded facilities on Pluto. The surveillance there wasn't something Boo could master. But this wasn't an abyss den. She won't be stopped. Today, the truth would be out. In a few minutes, Blue Flash reached the top floor. Boo already tracked the other floors. The materials that were going in and out of these floors were the known ingredients. They were common in both Roxana's and miracle potions. So, the final crucial ingredient could only be on the top floor. Boo, are there any clues about the final floor? Varian asked in a stern voice. Unlike the previous floors, there were no cameras on the top floor. No technological surveillance. Not even the most basic sensors. It was a blind spot they couldn't overcome. So, when Blue Flash decided to sneak into the top floor's lab, she knew full well that it was a risky gamble. But she did it anyway. If this clears Enigma's and my fallen member's reputation, why not? Those were her words before she risked her life. Finally, the moment of truth arrived. Blue Flash slowly walked up to the final floor. Like every other floor, this floor also had a dedicated square room in the center where the lab facility was located. The perimeter was left open for security. And as expected, there were 3 level 9 guards on the 4 sides of the lab, leaving one side exposed for entrance. And this lab, unlike its predecessors, was covered by opaque black walls. From time to time, packaged boxes would be sent out from here to the lower floors. On the lowest floor, the final process took place and gamma potions were created. One would expect the opposite of the arrangement, but for some strange reason, the crucial ingredient was given more security than the product itself. I have only one chance. Blue Flash completely converged her breathing and aura. She felt the cold touch of the item in her palm and felt like she was carrying a mountain in her hand. The senses of the 3 level 9s passed through her silently. Gladly, she wasn't found. But once she made the slightest movement, no, not even a movement. Once she even circulated her space power actively to make a move, she'd be found out. She waited for the right time. And waited. And waited. Until the door opened once again. Her space power exploded all of a sudden and divided into 2 streams. The first stream went into the item in her hand and the second stream channeled into the floor. Boom! The level 9s locked onto her the next moment. Caw! With the sound of a mirror breaking, a large black line appeared on the top floor and the next moment, the space broke apart. It was as if someone painted a section of the floor pitch black. The space fluctuations from the cracks sucked in air and broke out into the floor. Boom! Boom! The heavily reinforced floor cracked apart like a cobweb while the walls started to shake. The only thing that stood motionlessly was the black-walled lab in the middle. Whoosh! Kill! 3 monstrous killing intents locked onto Blue Flash along with 3 simultaneous attacks. A powerful psychic power infiltrated her mind while a glowing bright red arrow, as bright as blood itself, rushed at her, followed by a lightning net. Blue Flash's eyes began to bleed under the psychic's attack while the space barrier she set up around her began to shake violently under the sheer pressure of fire arrow and lightning net. Heh! She smirked and used her space powers. SZZZ. The space around her fluctuated and tried to restrain her. As an important facility, the space restraining formation here was very strong. But not strong to the extent that it could stop a level 9. Humph. With a tough push, Blue Flash broke through the restriction and teleported. But right when she disappeared, the fire arrow broke her space defense and the lightning net grazed her. Arg! Kill! The killing intent exploded from the block as 3 level 9s shot into the air and dashed towards the figure high in the air. Ugh! Blue Flash groaned in pain as golden lightning clicked around her body. Zap! Zap! Hostile lightning mana coursed through her blood and damaged her organs, electrocuting her to severe injuries. On the other hand, the skin on her body was burnt to a crisp. Every drop of blood in her body was on the verge of boiling away while her lower abdomen, where the fire arrow actually attacked, gave her a feeling that it might turn into ashes. Her condition was serious and if she had another exchange of blows, even for a level 9, the injuries would turn fatal. In fact, The primary reason she was so injured was that the level 9 psychic invaded her mind and weakened her space barrier. This made her an easy target and she took way more damage than otherwise. Still, it was all worth it. Capture her. A voice reverberated across the secret realm. Blue Flash raised her head and saw the blue sky, burning as a red fire filled the sky. A terrifying aura exploded like a volcano and locked her. A burning red flame rose into the air and rushed at her from the horizon. 100 miles away, the 3 level 9s were on their way towards her, but it was the Fire Awakener that sent a shiver down her spine. Peak level 9. Blue Flash muttered in shock. The 4 auras that locked onto her tried to lock her in place. Blue Flash channeled her space power and forcibly broke the lock, at the cost of exacerbating her injuries and coughing a mouthful of blood. As her situation turned from bad to worse, her vision blurred. Boom! Right as the Awakeners were about to reach her, the air exploded. The red sky was gone, replaced by a blue ceiling, and a cool feeling spread throughout her body as a familiar healing potion started to flow through her veins. Ha! Blue Flash sucked in a sharp breath and her vision turned back to normal. Seeing the familiar face looking at her in concern, she managed to speak. Did I do it? Yes, you did, Varian said with a bright smile. Blue Flash lost consciousness with a relieved smile on her face. Varian's smile receded and his face turned solemn. Boom! Shwa! Dark red flames filled the sky and transformed into a fire phoenix. With a screech, the elemental creature flapped its wings and chased after the ghost ship. Whoosh! Ghost ship rushed out of the secret realm and within seconds, was out of Earth's atmosphere. The 3 level 9s couldn't keep up and only the peak level 9 Fire Awakener, a very old man with a long white beard, chased them into outer space. But due to the very public display of the chase, the Space Patrol, the satellites, and the Border Army were alerted. They checked the scene and saw an old man riding on top of a fire phoenix with bloodshot eyes. He seemed to be chasing someone, but who? There was no one. Stop him. The Space Patrol followed the command and they encircled the old man, despite his high aura. The old man's eyes widened in rage as he looked at the soldiers. The only reason he was able to track Ghost Ship despite it being in stealth mode was that he locked onto it through his fire sense. But once it went out of the range, everything was over. Out of the way. He yelled and with a wave of his hand, a sea of flames rose. These flames were enough to seriously injure them. As a peak level 9, he didn't think anyone could stop him, but he still dealt a heavy hand. They dared to stop me. He growled. His rage only boiled further as he noticed the ghost ship was about to slip away from his fire sense's range. You won't escape. He roared and urged the fire phoenix forward, right through the sea of fire that was burning the soldiers. Scree, caw. The cry of the fire phoenix stopped abruptly as it was blown away into bits of fire. Space cracked and the fire suddenly died down instantly. A man in a high-ranking military uniform stood in front of the old man. The man looked to be middle-aged, but he had a sense of mature handsomeness beyond anyone handsome, even Sovereign Julius. The scar on his left cheek didn't diminish his image, but only enhanced it further by adding valor and danger to his look. Old guy, roll down to the prison and answer me or I'll blow up your head, got it? Evander asked in a cold tone. You! How dare you! The old man raised his fire mana and the next moment, Evander was drowned in a sea of fire. As the vast flames swallowed him, he stood there silently, appearing weak and tiny. I can still catch them. The old man gritted his teeth and was about to rush towards the ghost ship. This was truly his last chance, but right then, a cold voice came and the sea of flames, the mighty fires, the sacred punishments that seemed impervious went off abruptly. What? The old man's eyes widened at the sight and his heart nearly stopped. No. The fires didn't go off abruptly. This man, his fists were now clenched. The fires, they were quelled by those fists. Just a punch? The old man gulped as he felt a terrifying killing intent lock on him. He knew full well that the only reason he was spared was his level. As a peak level 9, he was deemed useful for the Federation. But he's also a peak level 9. Why did I lose so easily? The old man complained. The one warning is over. Act again and I'll slaughter you, Evander said, and his figure blurred. The next moment, he appeared beside the old man and held him by the neck. Let's go. No. Feeling the tight grip on his neck, the old man cried out while gnashing his teeth. Just you wait. Leave him alone, High General Evander. A cold voice appeared in the distance and golden light flashed. Sovereign Julius appeared. Evander was taken aback. He was sort of expecting Julius' appearance, but not this way. Right now, Julius' face was twisted and his eyes seemed to burn in rage. But Evander saw something else too. Fear. He's chasing after Dreamer, Julius said in a gloomy voice. There was huge discomfort in Julius' heart at Evander. After realizing that Kyle, Maya, Seth, and even Gareth were missing, he finally ordered the kidnapping of Sarah. Yes, he knew it could bring in huge repercussions, but he did it anyway. It was already a risk on his part. But to his utter humiliation and dismay, he found out that Sarah too was missing. For a moment, he doubted whether Evander was the one behind all this. I can't kill him. Even for me, that is beyond the line. Julius gritted his teeth and ordered coldly. Dreamer is escaping. General Julius, I said, chase after him. Oh, Evander raised a brow and his comms suddenly rang. A planetoid is ambushed. Need to go, Sovereign Julius. With a wave of his hand, Evander jumped into a spacecraft and disappeared. Arg! The space shook with Julius' screams. His rage was beyond control. Dreamer not only infiltrated the most important secret realm, he nearly sneaked into the top floor. If not for the security, Julius couldn't imagine what would happen. But the worst of it all? Even when such an emergency came, they didn't contact him. If they did, he'd have used his ring and arrived almost momentarily. But the cunning Dreamer seemed to have locked down the whole area. It was only after a few seconds that they were able to contact Julius. However, for such a level 9 awakeners, a few seconds was a lot of time. So, Julius lost any chances of chasing down Dreamer. His day was ruined and his disappointment was immeasurable. It'd have been ruined further had he known that Dreamer did indeed succeed in his mission. Tens of thousands of miles away, Varian clicked on his comm. The item that Blue Flash carried inside was a special camera. When she was on the top floor, Blue Flash created 2 streams of space power right after the lab door opened. The most prominent one was used for development while the other one was used to teleport this item into the lab. And now, Varian saw the most crucial ingredient of the Gamma Potion. His eyes widened as he stood up. Fuck. This blue liquid is the crucial ingredient, but what is it made of? He strained his eyes and focused on the connections to the cubic container. The room seemed to be built especially for anti-surveillance purposes. So, even the special camera couldn't pierce through this darkness. Thankfully, there was another way. The hologram's light flickered on and off, shedding light on a few of what seemed to be hundreds of special metallic wires connected to the container. Varian focused his gaze and followed these wires. These wires, intricate and sturdy, each seemed to go to a different section. And from time to time, they pulsed ever so slightly, and then, the blue liquid rose. What is it? Varian held his breath and followed the wires to their end. What he saw was complete darkness. F.A. Then, the light hit. Glass tubes, human-sized glass tubes filled the room. Each of these cylinders were filled with blue liquid and the creatures in it were unmistakably humans. Gah. Varian suppressed his gagging and focused his vision once again. It was a terrible, no, gut-wrenching sight. This time, he was able to see clearly. Hundreds of teenagers were kept in glass tubes. Each of them floated in it while their body was covered by wires. And these same wires were connected to the container. Fuck. Varian slumped on the ground and said vacantly. A sense of revulsion churned inside his stomach and Varian had to forcibly control himself. The main component, Sia's blood infused with her auras, is missing in this potion. It is replaced by something, I'm not sure. This new ingredient is also the most important one. But from my observation, this ingredient, combined with others, can have a devastating long-term impact. Sia's blood is substituted, like this? As he recalled Enigma's report, Varian gritted his teeth. The light in the dark lab flickered on and off. No human worked there. Thus, no one could see the pale faces and skinny bodies of the entrapped humans. Most of them were teenagers, aging from 18 to 20. It reminded him of Sia. Motherfuckers. Varian's blood boiled with rage. He slammed the floor of the ghost ship and forcibly stood up. The desire to utterly and brutally destroy Xanders coursed through every fiber of his being. Use me. Let your rage guide you to me. Bring chaos. Destroy order. Varia's eyes began to turn pitch black as his aura began to fluctuate. It was as if something deeply primeval awakened and spoke to him. Varian was sure he didn't hear any voices, but he was also sure that such a message was conveyed to him. He just needed to use the immense rage he was feeling right now and the power would unleash itself. It wasn't his power, he would merely be an agent. And in its wake, it'd destroy the world as he knew it. No. The moment he uttered that simple but decided word, the world seemed to have paused. Varian's eyes turned back to normal and the blackness in his eyes quickly faded away. Taking a deep breath, Varian controlled his emotions and said in a voice filled with pain and rage. Boo, check the identities of those humans, Varian said, feeling irony at the term he was using. Humans. Calling those who suffered the same name as those who were responsible for suffering was an insult. Xanders, from today, your downfall begins. Varian had an unshakable certainty. He didn't know exactly when, but he decided to erase the name of Xanders out of existence. Master. Boo appeared in front of him and cried out as it showed a hologram. It was a list of many teen boys and girls. Varian couldn't associate these bright stars on the list with the near skeletons in that room. They are all geniuses but couldn't match their peers because of the lack of resources. They are all officially dead. Since they were spread across different planets, space stations, space cities, and even cluster cities, no one had found anything strange with their accidental deaths. Boo shook its face and explained. Boom. As Varian clenched his fists, the sheer force caused the air in his palm to explode and a shockwave swept across the ghost ship. With that, the rage in his heart finally came under control. What's the most sensational news now? Varian asked in a low voice. It's you beating up the Shadow Guardian's relative, calling him a traitor, and that every relative of Shadow Guardian should be severely tortured, Boo answered in a cautious voice. To be sure, that video only became famous because Varian asked it to push it. What about the Dreamer incident? Varian raised a brow. They blocked it. Any related news is taken down. Boo shrugged. In fact, the government also started pushing your news to keep the public distracted. Heh. Varian sneered in contempt. Indeed, if the legendary Gamma Expo failed due to Sovereign Julius destroying the stadium, then the entire event would become a laughing stock. Master, do you want me to expose the event? Boo asked with sparkling eyes. No. Let people hate Shadow Guardians even more. Spread my post and any other government posts regarding how evil the Shadow Guardians are. Varian instructed. All right. Boo nodded in confusion. Oh right, Varian slapped his forehead and his lips curled up into a vicious smile. Didn't the Xanders go above and beyond in calling Shadow Guardians the traitors? He asked with a cold expression. Well, not all. But most did. Boo said, trying not to look at Varian's scary face that was only turning scarier with each passing second. Select one from the established leaders. Pick another from the rising leaders. Then, raise their reputation the meta-net with their comments on Shadow Guardians. Varian narrowed his eyes and instructed. Be but master. Boo stuttered in shock. If Boo does that, then everyone will hate Shadow Guardians even more. Aren't they already doing it? Varian sneered. Let their hate reach its peak. Go completely anti-Shadow Guardian. Oh, and give big credits to the Xanders. Remember Boo, Xander's reputation must reach its peak. Fine. Boo obeyed the order regardless of the sense it made. Boo did want to ask him why, but looking at the cold smile on the corner of his lips, it lost all courage. Most of the time, Varian was very approachable. But during times like these, he was the scariest person Boo knew. Fortunately, Boo is not Master's enemy. Wiping the virtual sweat off its forehead, Boo made its way to the control room of the ghost ship. It checked Blue Flash's condition, and after noticing the high electrical readings, Boo ordered the bots to administer a special herbal potion to remove the lightning mana in her body. Then, it started Varian's task. Even for Boo, manipulating social media on such a huge scale while remaining hidden from the technocrats wasn't easy. I need motivation. So, Boo recalled Varian's cold smile and nodded. Yes. When Master is like that, he's full of energy. So, Boo tried to imitate it. Mwahaha. You appear out of nowhere, tell me she's a victim, really now? Haru looked at Dreamer in displeasure. Well, I shouldn't be showing this yet. But since you, her father, I am willing to trust you. Varian in the hologram thought and tapped on his comm. What are you? Haru stopped abruptly as a file popped up in his comm. It was a lengthy, extremely technical, and arduous proof of a signal block. It was the proof made by the scientists under Sovereign Irene after testing the blocker. This. Haru's eyes widened and he scrambled for a holographic pen. After an hour, Haru slumped in his chair and looked vacantly at Enigma. I'm sorry, girl. Enigma didn't know how to respond to a guy who wasn't even 1/10 her age referring to her as a girl. We need your help, Dreamer stressed and pointed to the vials of blue liquid. I can give you some readings from the lab's hologram, and Enigma will tell you crucial information about the original potion and the original crucial ingredient, a girl's blood, Dreamer said in a serious tone. Haru widened his eyes as he felt an ominous premonition. Enigma, who was silent until then, spoke for the first time. I have a feeling this gamma potion is a bit off. I have the information, you are the expert. We need to find out what's wrong with the potion. Haru opened his mouth to reject, but recalling the fact that his daughter Maya always liked Shadow Guardians, nodded helplessly. Good. Let's get going. A difficult task began. Across the solar system, social media was on fire. Given the size of the Federation, there were multiple solar social media platforms, but also many numerous regional platforms. Unless it was a very special occasion, the trending news on the regional platforms didn't align with the solar platforms. An example of a special occasion was the Gamma Expo. Since it had been a few hours since its end, billions of people watched the expo. Most of them couldn't believe what they were seeing. Awakeners breaking their bottleneck and advancing an entire level. Even if it was peak level 5, they reached level 6. It was a miracle, something out of a fairy tale. But now, they saw in front of their own eyes. For a while, people kept crying in gratitude and thanking Xanders. The status of the Prime family went from Guardians of the Earth to Guardians of Humanity. It was only a short period of time, but the effect of gamma potions had profound ripple effects. The Xander family had always been trying to expand its influence onto other planets. Venus and Mars already had a significant presence. The next targets were naturally Mercury and Jupiter. Until now, these two planets were under the heavy influence of the most senior sovereign, Albert, and the second strongest Prime family, the Karen family respectively. But with the success of the gamma potion, the regional powers were swayed. They called up the Xander family one by one and started to discuss win-win cooperations. Some of them even explicitly stated they were willing and even hoping to be vassals of the Xander family, given that they get a quota of gamma potions. The Xanders were arguably at their best. Not even Julius' father, Caesar Xander, commanded such influence. Now, both publicly and privately, Xanders were emerging as a power beyond the prime families. The Xanders themselves were elated. While they knew that Dreamer caused drama and even kidnapped an important scientist, such trivialities faded in front of their rising status. Of course, Julius was unhappy. He kept breaking things in his room and even slapped a butler to near death. Now, no one dared to congratulate him. But they themselves were celebrating. While they were at it, unknowingly, two names started to frequently appear on social media. Xander, the deputy head of the Xander family, was a peak level 9 beast morpher. He was also the brother of Caesar Xander and uncle of Julius. Unknown to everyone else, he was the one responsible for striking a deal between Julius and Creo to erase Sia's existence from memories. Of course, he was also the same man who opposed Shadow Guardian's extermination and was called out by Julius for his hypocritical double standards. The other was Princess Iris Xander, a level 7 beast morpher and one of the possible candidates for the next sovereign. If not for Charles Xander's sudden rise, she would have remained the #1 genius of the Xanders. Now, these two people were experiencing what could only be described as wild fame on steroids. Their previous interviews, press meets and social media posts exploded. One was the established giant, while the other was the brightest rising star, but they had one thing in common: their strong language on Shadow Guardians. Since the start of the event, they demonized the Guardians while painting the Xanders as the forces of good. Xander personally didn't want this, but as the deputy's head, he did it for the family. Princess Iris Xander did it for influence. Regardless of their reasons, their previous posts under the intervention of an invisible hand were suddenly made famous. Xander is a true hero of humanity. Princess Iris, I'm your biggest fan. I want to be like you when I grow up. +1, +2, Princess Iris is the future sovereign. Shadow Guardians are exterminated. Their relatives should be tortured in the cruelest way so that no one even dares to think of betraying humanity. Agreed. Do it. Oh, a guy already proposed it in the Gamma Expo. I think you saw this video already, it's everywhere. Slowly, in every post regarding Iris also started having posts of Varian brutally beating up the Shadow Guardian's relative. The public sentiment started brewing. In a matter of hours, the reputation of Xander and Iris Xander reached new heights, only under the unreachable sovereign Julius. The Xander family also made use of the momentum and announced that Xander was the one who overlooked and spearheaded the extermination of Shadow Guardians. They originally wanted Julius with the role, but due to his bad mood, no one dared to approach him. Thus, as his position elevated further, Xander gave a heart-to-heart interview describing his views on Shadow Guardians. I will personally oversee the torture of the Shadow Guardians' relatives. They're the vilest scum of humanity. I tried to stop Julius, but they're dead now. I don't like what I'm saying, but it's for the family my brother built after all. Xander comforted himself, hoping his conscience wouldn't find his actions despicable. Yay! I finally got some recognition. It's not just Charles and the family, alright? Before his sudden rise, I was the biggest genius. Notice me. Princess Iris Xander was finally happy with the attention she was finally getting. As the two got more and more famous along with the post of Varian beating up the Guardian's relative, a narrative was slowly consolidated. Xanders became the heroes, with and Iris leading them, while Guardians became the villains, with Enigma at the helm. As their reputation reached a peak, Varian's calm rang. We found the undiscovered effects of Gamma Potion. They are, reading the message, he smiled. His lips arched into a bloodthirsty smile as he let out a roaring laugh. It's finally time. Just one moment. And boom. The reputation painstakingly built through months, years, and even a lifetime smash into smithereens. The best living example was Enigma herself. Despite the ignorant seeing her as the leader of a terrorist outfit, the ones that came in contact with the Guardians saw her as a guardian in the shadows. With each life that Shadow Guardians saved, with each battle they helped, with each accomplishment they made, her reputation rose. Particularly after the Valos War, Shadow Guardians' reputation reached an all-time peak in the elite communities. Naturally, Enigma was the helm of that respect and admiration. She garnered so much praise that there were some groups even debating publicizing her true deeds, despite the risk of angering the Xanders. That was how much reputation rose. But in the blink of an eye, it all crumbled like a sandcastle. The savior of the world became the world's enemy, the alien that was to be slain. As the proofs came in one by one and evidence stacked up against her, Enigma turned from a sacred hero to the vilest evil. People couldn't digest this sudden change and it multiplied their hatred towards her. Going from extreme admiration to extreme hatred was extreme. The quote really seemed true. It took years to build a reputation, but only a moment to break it. But Varian disagreed. Unlike Enigma, Xanders didn't build their reputation on months, years, or even a lifetime. The strongest Prime family's reputation as a product of 500 years, the hard work of many generations. If Enigma's reputation was like fragile glass, then Xander's reputation was like tough steel. A piece of bad news or two would hardly make a dent. Even if it was terrible news, it won't crack the metal. And unless it was disastrous, the metal wouldn't break. In fact, even if the news was disastrous, there was a high chance that people would rather believe it's false to keep up their original opinions. I can't completely destroy the Xanders' reputation. Varian leaned back in his chair and crossed his legs. Contrary to what one might expect given his hatred towards Xanders, Varian seemed pretty laid back. In fact, if one just went by his words and sight, they would think that Varian was on a vacation. They are too entrenched in the society to be wiped out in one blow, Varian muttered, but his eyes didn't lose their spark of ambition. Instead, they shone brighter, as it did his ambition. Even the mighty Devis couldn't last forever. What are the mere Xanders in comparison? Varian smiled mockingly, his glee visible from the nasty smile on his face. Host, Devis had a chance of lasting forever. At least, their leader. But it was the system that ended them. Shouldn't the host be thanking system? Shut up. Why can't I have a few minutes of self-reflection without you popping up? Varian rolled his eyes in annoyance. What a cruel host. The system didn't hesitate when you wanted to lower your aura level or lock your path, yet you abandoned the system right after using it. Host, if you do this to any human woman, she'd call you a scumbag. You. Varian was dumbfounded. Don't joke around like that, my heart can't take it. The system merely made a suitable analogy. Seriously, what the fuck happened to you? I want that emotionless, cold and stupid system back. You get what you deserve. Varian opened his mouth to refute, but in the end, he simply waved his hand and ended the conversation. Turning his attention back to his comm, he checked the status. After confirming that the plan was almost set, he walked to a remote room. Cree. The door creaked open and Varian stepped into the darkness. The darkness couldn't stop his advanced senses. The body suspended in the middle by metal chains was more than visible. There were also special bots circling around this body and injecting it with special liquids from time to time. Ta. 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 Hearing the footsteps from the darkness, the body twisted fiercely and twitched, as if it wanted to call for help. All that came out of the body's mouth as a muffled groan. His eyes started to lose focus and he felt the same dreadful feeling again. No matter how many times he experienced it, it was horrifying. Varian appeared in front of the man and the room lit up, causing Dr. Thomas to close his eyes forcibly. Dr. Thomas's body was now as bloody as one could. Bone breaking, tendons cutting, and scorching, everything was tried and tested on him. How have you been? Is the accommodation sufficient? Varian asked with an innocent expression, causing Dr. Thomas to shiver fiercely. Varian snapped his fingers and Dr. Thomas suddenly found himself able to talk. Why you? You are going to die a gruesome. I didn't ask you to divine my future. Varian shrugged as a dark silence filled the room. Anyway, today is the day revenge against Enigma's enemies begins. Varian declared a seemingly impossible event casually. Out of all the people who were responsible for today's fiasco, you are one of the main culprits. Collaborating with Abyssals and sending the tracker to those that betrayed Enigma. Varian's eyes chilled. Dr. Thomas's felt the pain course through his body and wished it all ended with a slice. But no. Death was a luxury now. And you were the one who invented the bullshit space radar. If not for you, the Shadow Guardian's secret realm wouldn't have been discovered. Varian clenched his fists as he fought back the urge to blast the body in front of him to pieces. You made a mess about Enigma's age. You made her miserable. Varian's eyes turned red as he snapped his fingers. Whoosh. A bot rushed towards Thomas and injected a special liquid. Ha! Dr. Thomas's world began to blur as he felt incredibly drowsy. Yet, he fought back this feeling with all his might. It was futile. Don't worry, as his world began to blur and darken, Dr. Thomas heard Varian's void. This is what you brought on yourself. Once you fall asleep, you won't be you anymore. Your sense of self will die. So, try not to sleep. Varian said in a casual tone and walked out. Since we began with you, the rest can start. So, since he was 14, he went to all sorts of online forums, groups, and panels to know the truth and only the truth. He knew full well about Enigma's deeds. And his admiration towards her was so much that he even tried to contact Shadow Guardians online. Thus, when Enigma's true goal was revealed, his world turned upside down. The hero in his heart turned out to be a despicable villain. The evidence was irrefutable. It had only been a few days since that incident, but John's mind was still preoccupied with Enigma's hunt. Why haven't they caught her yet? He complained. Then, he did what most of his peers did. He scrolled through his social media. Again? The biggest headline was that the traitors being beaten up and tortured in the Gamma Expo. I wonder if people are sadists? Or else why is this news this popular for so long? John shook his head and scrolled down. Then came the interviews of Xander and Princess Iris Xander. John's face had a complicated emotion as he looked at these two people. In the past, he despised the Xanders. But realizing their deeds, he couldn't help but respect them. With a sigh, he scrolled down when he suddenly noticed something was weird. News, a piece of news was visibly climbing up the leaderboard rankings. 5 seconds passed and John opened his mouth in shock. 100, 95, 90. 15 seconds passed. John stood up dumbfounded. He still couldn't believe what he was seeing. 80, 70, 60. 30 seconds passed and John quickly checked the other social media platforms, both regional and solar. It was the same piece of news. It was the same anonymous source. But the speed of the climb remained the same. A single minute passed. 1. The news finally reached the apex position on the leaderboards. Gulp. John looked at the different leaderboards on the 7 holograms and gulped. They all had the same news. Enigma isn't a threat. She is a victim. The title was absurd. John wondered who even dared to post it. Even if they were anonymous, the Federation could track them down. But why did it climb the rankings then? He narrowed his eyes and clicked on the title. The hologram flashed a blue light and the plain white background was gone. The relatively 2D hologram till then turned 3D as a small forest occupied John's room. In the middle of the forest was a dome-shaped lab building. Outside the building, an old man stood with a small smile. Uranus' most famous scientist. John knew this old man. His friends who were in the research stream described him as the closest we ever got to a legend. "Hello, fellow human," the old man began. "We were under the assumption that Enigma is a principal threat, however, it is all false." He took out what seemed to be a strange black disk and started drawing out strange calculations. John could follow it for a few seconds, but soon, he had no idea what was going on. So, he skipped to the end and found the old man saying, "This proves that any information going out of the solar system is getting blocked by items like these. And to repeat it again, abyssals have plenty of them on Pluto," the old man said in a hushed tone. Then, his eyes glowed fiercely as he declared, "As the head of the Uranus Research Committee, I am throwing every single scientist of the solar system. You can check the authenticity of this video with technocrats. You can personally send out messages and track them. You can verify if those messages are being bounced back or not through my formula. I dare you all, prove me wrong." John blankly stared at the hologram. The next thing he knew, he lost the strength in his knees and plopped on his butt. How can it be?" he muttered in a broken voice. He used to revere her but then hated her. Now, he's being told that the charges against her were all false? No way. John shook his head fiercely. Fortunately or unfortunately, humans were creatures of habit. They resisted change. So, John decided he wouldn't change his opinion on Enigma from this one post. But once given the right incentive, humans were also extremely adept at changing. "I will let the other scientists debunk it. Venus scientists are more than enough," he said to himself and searched for the relevant links. As expected, even though it had been less than half an hour since the news was uploaded, there were already hundreds of expert responses. John's lips broke into a hopeful smile and he selected the expert with the most followers, one of Mercury's leading scientists. A thin woman with red hair and straight brows appeared on the hologram. "I will prove you wrong in 5 minutes," she said and started the experiment. John watched in anticipation. 1 minute passed. 2 minutes passed, 5 minutes passed. The confidence on her face was nowhere to be found as a solemn expression appeared on her face. "No, but why, is this the reason?" she muttered incoherently, and despite getting negative results, she continued. In the end, 20 minutes passed with the redhead trying multiple times to prove that this message bounce back was all fake. After all, how could anyone lock down the solar system, right? Arg. I stand corrected. This is indeed verifiable. Guys, it's official. Enigma threat is a hoax. The redhead yelled. John's body trembled as his face turned as pale as a sheet of paper. His heart pounded for the truth, but his brain couldn't accept such a result. Begrudgingly, he pressed for the next famous scientist. Bless you. The proposed theory holds true. Indeed, Enigma's threat is fake. John felt his heart drop as he checked out the other experts. They all gave the same answer. Of course, he encountered one or two who didn't agree and showed why the proof is wrong. But they were all quickly corrected by the real scientists. Soon, tens of thousands of verifications filled a pool and were still filling. Amidst all this, Neptune's Science Academy released a video. We verify this is true. This news is going to be declared on the planet level. Fuck. John cursed out in shock. With an academy themselves proving it to be true, there could be nothing more convincing. Yes, sir, Dreamer is. One of the four stuttered but didn't dare to continue. However, what he wanted to say was already conveyed. Gotcha. With a single stomp, the floor under Julius cracked and the entire building began to shake violently. Julius clenched his fists as veins popped up on his forehead. Dreamer this, Dreamer that, don't remind me of that guy. That fucker. He's still alive. How the fuck is he still alive? Julius couldn't understand. He was sure that Dreamer took his last hit unarmed. Dreamer, no, Varian was set to die. After his apparent death, Julius received the news that Varian's close ones that were supposed to be detained were missing. While he had some suspicions, Julius ultimately believed it was due to some backup plan. If I die, you all have to escape, live with changed identities. Or something like that. But even the thought that Varian could be alive didn't pass through his mind. Enigma isn't a threat. She is a victim. Whatever he wanted to believe, the fact that this post was at top of all social media platforms despite all his technocrats working against it, was the ultimate testament to Varian's survival. That son of a bitch. Julius wasn't all polite with his language. He is like an annoying fly. He can't do much, but he keeps annoying the heck out of me. Indeed, even if Enigma was proven innocent, the public opinion on Xanders wouldn't be negative. Because this so-called new proof was essentially achieved through a breakthrough method. Meaning that no one before that Uranus old guy even knew about this. And to be honest, no one, including Julius, could guess why the old scientists suddenly had a breakthrough. It was due to the blocker. But so far, the released video only showed the blocker without going into detail about what it actually was. Regardless, Xanders weren't losing their reputation through this. We didn't know about this method. We were judging the situation based on existing knowledge. The Xanders could say and dust their hands off this matter. Thinking of this, Julius' rage slowly calmed down. Yes, my family's reputation is unaffected. Wait. The attack on Gamma Potion's secret realm, was it also orchestrated by him? Julius' body froze as an ominous premonition rose in his heart. No. The top floor isn't connected to anything. It can't be hacked. It's safe. He shook his head and reassured himself. Hey. He looked at the 4 CEOs who were basically bending over completely and despised their incompetence. Stand straight. He spat coldly. Sir. Morons. Stand straight. Julius hissed and the wind began to cool down. The 4 leaders stood up and looked at Julius meekly. While their eyes still had the admiration and reverence towards the youngest sovereign, there was another emotion now. Doubt. Why did the Xanders publicize that she was a threat so proactively? Of course, while basically every scientist also thought that Enigma could message her species, and warn the populace, the Xanders were at another level. They acted as the knights of morality and led the metaphorical witch hunt. A hunt that was ultimately proven to be based on falsehood. Since you can't stop the post, just shut down the platforms, Julius said lightly, not caring one bit about the huge impact it'd have on people's daily lives. Sir. The only woman out of the 4 shook her head. What? Ms. Zakhanov, do you really intend to disobey orders? You realize how adversely this news affects the Federation's credibility, right? Julius narrowed his eyes and asked in a cold voice. I do. Ms. Zakhanov, a thin lady with a sweet voice, replied. Then what? The impatience in Julius' voice was obvious. To prevent the events where Abyssals take control of Federation's social media, our servers are decentralized. Basically, as long as a few nodes are running, the platform will be active. It could slow down, but it won't shut down. The more she spoke, the worse Julius' face turned. But she had to finish her point. And Dreamer, he is controlling a few nodes. We can't even close down the platforms. Bang! Julius slammed the wall and a shockwave spread. Whoosh! The sheer force of the wind that rushed out of the window destroyed everything in sight for dozens of miles before it died down. Gulp. Ms. Zakhanov felt incredibly lucky that she was on Jupiter and could only attend this meeting virtually. At least do something. Any fucking thing. Julius cursed in foul language, completely unbefitting his status. The gentle and righteous image of Julius in their minds began to change, but they maintained a polite smile. We'll do our best, sir. Ms. Zakhanov assured him, despite knowing full that the situation was completely out of control. After she checked the stats in the past 24 hours, she noticed that there seemed to be an invisible hand pushing this agenda. This invisible hand was very subtle. Even her team of experts couldn't find it existed and considered that she merely imagined things. But Ms. Zakhanov was certain. Her intuition was what brought her here today. During the first few minutes of this proof release by Uranus Old Scientist, this invisible hand still kept pushing the news to the top. She thought. If it was still the invisible hand responsible for popularity, she'd have thought of a way to deal with it. But now, there's no need for the other party to do anything. This was her biggest frustration. The news was spreading like wildfire. It was only growing exponentially with each passing second. As more and more people learned about it, they started sharing it more and more. As her hologram dissipated, Ms. Zakhanov looked at Sovereign Julius and sighed. Sometimes, the greatest selling point was truth itself. But as she recalled Julius' chilling eyes, she made a tough decision. And these people started to post their personal interactions with Shadow Guardians and Enigma. While there were only a few who had direct interactions with Enigma, there was a ton of people whose lives were influenced by Shadow Guardians. The social media giants couldn't take down Dreamer's post. But the same couldn't be said for these posts. So, they began a round of cleansing. In a matter of minutes, they erased everything related to Enigma except the original post that they couldn't delete. The proofs, the reactions, the apologies, everything was gone. Initially, the leaders of these platforms thought they did a great job. And when they got the calls from sovereigns one by one, they were even more pleased. But reality bitch slapped them. Smash. You dickheads. What are you trying to accomplish? Sovereign Ares growled at the 4 holograms in front of him. You think we are gods and can do whatever we can't? Or do you think the public can't even see your preposterous actions? Lightning snakes coiled around him, hissing at them to answer obediently. But sir, we don't want the image of the Federation to be damaged. Caw. Are you stupid or are you stupid? After what you've done, the public will direct their anger toward the Federation. You've done exactly what you were trying to prevent. Once the public loses trust in the institutions, the society will crumble. Sovereign Irene lectured in a raging tone. But, we were only trying to help maintain the public image. Cree. What a terrible decision. Sovereign Kevin shook his head regretfully. If we came out clean and let the Xanders, at least a few of them, admit their mistake, the fiasco would have ended smoothly. But sir, we were also instructed. A leader cried out. Boom. Instructed by one sovereign and you didn't even consult the rest when taking such a big decision. Do you guys have water inside your brains? Sovereign Michael Karen, the eternal pessimist, stared at them like he wanted to eat them alive. Now the public will revolt. The army will also revolt. They'll call you greedy corporations and us sovereigns as dictators. While we plunge into civil war, abyssals will attack and kill us all. Sovereign Michael Karen blankly stared into the outer space and said in despair. Sir, the situation isn't as bad as you think. Schwa. Isn't bad as I think? Oh. Then you tell me, why did the special apps on the black market get 100x more downloads than usual in the past few hours? And this number is going up as we speak. Sovereign Creo said in a low tone. Our public image has taken a hit. In the private chat rooms, people started blaming the Federation. There's only one solution to this. Sovereign Creo looked at them plainly and said. What is that, sir? Another leader asked apprehensively. Boom. You guys take responsibility, and apologize in public. Sovereign Vian rolled on a fluffy bed as she chuckled. Apologize? A leader stuttered. But if we do that, our careers would. It was the same as pleading their guilt. Once this issue blows up in courts, their lives would be caught up in an endless nightmare of lawsuits. Until now, they planned to use some scapegoats they bought out in their company in case of legal problems, but if they take responsibility and apologize, that's a different issue altogether. Is there no other way? Hee hee. Sovereign Vian fanned herself as she lazily glanced at them. The room was filled with gold and jewelry one couldn't imagine in their lifetime. Yet, she seemed to be interested more in the 4 holograms than the treasures. It's been too long since something like this happened. So, you big corporation guys have no idea how much mess you've made. The apology isn't the end, it's only the beginning. She chuckled to herself and waved her hand. The water vapor in the air started to condense and ate away the hologram projector. But won't an apology suffice? It won't. There is one more step. The oldest of all sovereigns, and also the most influential among them, Sovereign Albert told the leaders emotionlessly. One more? The leaders paled. Just this much was enough to kill them financially and socially. And he's telling them they need one more fucking step. Yes. Just one more and all your guilt will be written off. Sovereign Albert nodded seriously. In fact, his expression was always serious. Legend had it that the last time Sovereign Albert genuinely smiled was when he was tickled at the age of 15. It was undeniable that Evander had been a bad father. But looking at the parenting he got from Albert, one couldn't really fault him. Even when Evander was a terrible father, he was light years ahead of Albert. The reason? At times, he could be incredibly apathetic. Sir, what is the next step? Oh. It's simple, really. Sovereign Albert smiled at them. It was a very professional smile. Not sincere in the slightest. But it did its job. The leaders looked at him and smiled back. As social creatures, this was their natural reaction. You just have to be hanged. Sovereign Albert said in a nonchalant tone. Pardon? The leaders thought they were hearing things. Had the audio system gone wrong? Or was someone playing a prank on them? The leaders thought that perhaps Dreamer himself is blocking this conversation. So, they looked at Albert with hopeful eyes and were even determined to read his lip movements to confirm his words. Oh right, I'm getting too old for this shit. Sovereign Albert shifted in his seat to a more comfortable position. Then he looked the leaders in the eye. Their eyes were full of hope and anticipation. But there was also another emotion they didn't notice. Fear. Heh. Sovereign Albert snickered and said in a nonchalant but undeniable tone. Don't worry too much about it. Their expression eased, but his next words caused them to freeze. After a public apology, you will all be hanged. If left unchecked, it'd have caused a massive upheaval economically and would have affected the harmony. Thankfully, as someone with a lot of experience in seeing the best and worst of humanity, Sovereign Albert made the right call. In a few minutes, the posts were restored and an apology letter was published by the leaders of the platforms, along with the Federation's official letter hanging them for their anti-people move. The rage that was beginning to build up melted away, and after gloating at the karma hitting back at the leaders, the public was engaged back in Enigma's discussion. John browsed through all the proofs and sniffed back his tears. I'm sorry, Enigma. Not just him, but as hours went by, most of the people that previously believed in Enigma, but were enraged after her identity was exposed, expressed their regret publicly. But the general populace was mostly ignorant of Enigma's deeds. They were curious at the intense outrage. However, having learned that it was about Enigma, they were baffled. Why are they apologizing to the leader of a terrorist organization? Do we have these many terrorists? No. Growing unrest began in the majority. Since Sovereign Julius used his clout to designate Shadow Guardians as a terror organization and for most of the part, assigned them as part of Shadow Order, most of the people lived under the wrong assumptions. Even if I get fined, jailed, I'll expose the truth. John gritted his teeth and opened a locked file in his calm with a click. It showed the dozens of files he collected over the past year. I hope truth can finally see the light of the day. Closing his eyes, he posted the files. #truth. It was like a small flap of a butterfly over a vast ocean. Seemingly insignificant and inconsequential. John believed so, yet he risked his career by posting the truth on an open social media platform. Whoosh. But John forgot. He was living in a deeply interconnected world, a gigantic web where a slight change at one point would ripple across the entire web, and that ripple had already begun. Contrary to their previous policies, the social media platforms didn't delete any files related to proving that Shadow Guardians weren't Shadow Order. I feel ashamed. Sovereign Albert shook his head as he looked at the floating holograms in front of him. They showed the massacre of the Shadow Guardians. Men, women, children, and elderly, not a single soul was spared. In the center of such brutality stood a handsome man. His eyes glowed in satisfaction as he breathed in the destruction he ordered. And the same man just started a video call with him. Sovereign Albert, why did you order them about Shadow Guardians? Julius gritted his teeth and questioned in a chilling tone. Julius, Sovereign Albert squinted his eyes at humanity's hope. You said the Guardians had aliens like Enigma and that they're a threat. But Enigma herself isn't a threat. Nor are the Guardians. Uttering those words, his eyes fluctuated lightly, but his face remained expressionless. His tone, however, lowered as if he was having a lump in his throat. It is a sin. We did it without foreknowledge. But, for the innocent lives taken, they should at least get justice. You can be mad at me all you want, but this is one thing I won't back off from. Albert leaned back in his chair and sighed. Julius stared at him in silence, but in the end, he sighed. With a snap, the holograms went off. Even though Julius was mad, he wasn't too mad. Shadow Guardians were surely being whitewashed. But the timing was also important. They were only proven innocent after they were all dead. Good riddance. He thought. As he expected, the public discourse on Enigma underwent a massive shift. Once the terror tag was removed from the Guardians and the threat tag was shaken off Enigma's identity, people's perception was now completely opposite. The majority now joined the Enigma supporters and soon, #RIP started to trend. Then came the most dreaded thing for any political shift. Why did you fool us the whole time? It was hard to answer, so, the Xanders simply didn't. Instead, they focused on damage control and pushed a narrative that some of the Shadow Guardians had links with Shadow Order. But the ones who believed that propaganda was a drop in the ocean. John looked at the viewers of his post. 100 million. Ha! He sucked in a breath of cold air, but warmth filled his heart. I did it. I showed the truth. He smiled like an idiot but soon broke into a crying fit. Because somewhere along the lines of reading the comments, someone asked him, why did you hide the truth for so long? Because I'm a coward. I can't speak the truth for fear that my life will be snatched from me. That's why I remained silent when Shadow Guardians risked their lives for ours again and again and again. John wiped the tears as he typed in the reply. With a sniff, he continued. But when I was ready to risk my life, their lives no longer exist. It was quite an irony, but a much bigger tragedy. I'm a coward, I'm a coward. He smashed his calm as he kept posting RIPs to the massacre pictures of the Shadow Guardians. Suddenly, a comment was highlighted on his original post. It was just 2 lines, but both the line and the sender filled John with a sense of energy he never had. The reply was, you were a coward, not anymore. The moment you decided to risk your everything and show the truth, you are a hero. Dreamer A/N, there was a real-life emergency. So, the release time was messed up, sad face. Donations. Killing the traitors. One by one, their acts kept surfacing and the reaction of the general public was so positive that even Varian was taken aback. Justice to Shadow Guardians. True heroes. We sinned. We killed our own heroes. RIP. The acknowledgement that Shadow Guardians could never get even with Enigma at the helm, they finally got it. Not just acknowledgement, but respect and admiration too. The archives were changed from dead Shadow Guardians to martyred. Famous buildings, tourist cities, and even corporations started to show their solidarity by projecting holograms of peace, playing videos of Shadow Guardians, And more importantly, excerpts from the people that were directly helped by them. Enigma, I never knew your organization was the one that saved my son's adventure team. I always thought it was the army. Thank you. A woman held her teenage son as she confessed in tears. There was also an old man fondly holding a broken sword. He looked at the camera and said in a lonely tone, "This old man is a veteran. My life was saved by a shadow guardian. I still remember that deadly night. I was stuck in the corpses, severely injured. An abyssal loomed over me and raised his menacing sword. His eyes glowed in rage and fear as he recalled the dreadful night. Then, he muttered almost as if he was talking to himself. I thought that was it. I always thought I didn't fear death, but at that moment, I realized I still wanted to spend more time with my granddaughter. She has just started to speak." He stared into the camera and confessed with a sad face. "I didn't want to lose her. My kids died in the army. I am also ready to die. But I want to wait at least until my granddaughter grows up. But I was under the abyssal sword. There was no hope." His wrinkled face finally showed a smile as he spoke with vigorous energy. Then he appeared. A young man. I still don't know who he is. But I do know that he isn't from the army. Unlike me, who is still in level 4 at my old age, he is a very talented kid. But I can tell, he was inexperienced. He nearly died fighting that abyssal, but he didn't back off and finally killed that bastard. Covering in injuries from head to toe, he turned to me and said, "Grandpa, stand up and fight. Our war isn't over yet." Once he said those words, tears started to flow down his cheeks. A battle-hardened man like him wouldn't shed tears, but now, he couldn't help but bawl like a child. That child, he died from injuries that very evening. Nobody would know about his injuries. Nobody would remember his pain. The more he said, the bleaker his voice turned. I thought nobody would know that a young man sacrificed his life to save me. But now, I beg you all. Please don't bury these heroes in the dust. Treat them as martyrs, not terrorists. They laid down their lives so that yours could be safe." As he was about to end the call, a cute voice called out, "Grandpa." A little girl slowly walked to him and hugged his leg. The old man smiled brightly and held her up. "I thank you, my savior. You didn't save one life, you saved two. You saved a family." He. The little girl giggled at the camera and pulled his beard. Whoosh. One by one, military officers started to share their own stories. It was an unwritten rule to not do so. But they did it anyway. I think humans aren't that bad," Varian said in surprise as he saw the visible change in front of his eyes. "Humans can be horrible, but they can also be very good." Blue Flash sat beside him in a chair and said, Varian nodded. "What now?" Blue Flash asked with an eager expression. "Wait for it." Varian smiled. 3, 2, 1. The metanet, which was flooded by the support of Enigma, seemed to be frozen. In a matter of minutes, another post took the world by storm. It was shared even more vigorously and it evoked only more panic. "This is Enigma. I can't forgive you for the deaths of my comrade, but I am here to share with you an ugly truth about gamma potions. 1. Its crucial ingredient is the blood of poor, young geniuses. For every gamma potion to be made, 10 geniuses would die." The video is linked below. Technocrats are invited to check the authenticity of the video. 2. The biggest problem is its side effects. Mainstream technology is still behind, but with a bit of my assistance, the hidden dangers of this potion are discovered. A. Divine paths could get abruptly locked, meaning one couldn't progress any further. B. Aura could riot. C. The more time passes after you took the potion, the more dangerous it becomes. This potion will create instability after a few weeks or months. Your body, in a bid to remain stable, will try to stop the potion. But in the process, it will sacrifice your vitality. You might die in a few weeks. Do not expect a long life. Below is the method you can use to verify my statements. I urge all scientific institutions to give it a try. Boom. To say her words were shocking was an understatement. People didn't know what to do or say. They wished that this message was by some impersonator and the whole thing a lie. But when the technocrats declared the video as authentic after an hour, the doubts in people's minds began to rise. If Gamma Potion wasn't the miracle it was claimed as, if Enigma's statements were indeed true, then Mercury Institute of Sciences agrees with. Jupiter Institute of Sciences verified the claim. Uranus Institute uncovered the horrifying truth behind Gamma Potion. When the last institute also verified the news, the metanet exploded. The fire of truth burnt down the darkness of ignorance. A historic moment, the first real step of the Xanders' destruction commenced. A/N, there was a real-life emergency. So, the release time was messed up. Sad face. Enigma. Dreamer. Julius slammed the wall as he uttered their names through gritted teeth. Boom. Gotcha. The wall that could easily withstand even attacks of level 9 started to tremble and cobweb-like cracks started to spread throughout. Julius snorted and glanced through the news. Xander family. What are you doing? They are kids. You want us to drink human blood? You nearly caused irreversible damage to humanity. If you can't even study it properly, why release the potion? Our hopes are crushed. The Xanders are no longer what they once were. Catch. Julius' hands dug into the wall as his body trembled in rage. There weren't just 1,000,000 or 100,000,000 messages against him, but more than 1,000,000,000. Ha. 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 Julius took in quick, sharp breaths as he tried to stabilize himself. He checked 15 minutes ago and it was only 300 million. The news absolutely blew up. I hate it. Julius clenched his fists so hard that his nails dug into his flesh and the splashing blood formed a small puddle near his feet. He contacted the sovereigns. Told them he'd conduct a separate investigation and asked to take down the post. Sovereign Julius, this is beyond our control. More than 100 million people already downloaded the proofs. Do you think we can stop them from sharing it with their personal contacts? And even if somehow manage that, what about the science academies that agreed with the claim? You shouldn't be thinking about reputation right now, but what you should answer us in the next sovereign meet. Sovereign Albert said in a cold voice. Julius knew that this old man was extremely disappointed by his reaction, but he didn't care. Ting. His hologram lit up and Julius eagerly tapped it. Sir. A hologram popped up and an old man greeted him with a tired face. What happened? Julius almost grabbed the collar of the old man. I've had my team check it thrice. There really is a big flaw in the potion. The old man said with a pale face. Is there no other way? Julius didn't notice it, but his voice was trembling. I apologize. A deep bow and regretful sorry was all this renowned scientist could give. It wasn't enough. Leave. Julius waved his hand and channeled his prana into the artifact. The space ring on his finger emitted ripples of space and the next moment, he appeared above the ocean. From high above, he could see the guardian islands in the ocean. Every other time, he felt that it was majestic. But now, as the roaring waves shook the ocean, he felt a different emotion rising in his heart. Fear. Xanders stood above the people. But it could also be said that the public let the Xanders stand above them. The same public also had the power to bring them down. Using lives of humans and feeding us the same thing. You vile monster. The Gamma Potion itself is harmful to anyone who drinks it. Imagine if our army took it. Are you a traitor? Treason. Hang the ones responsible. Xanders should be punished. Julius sighed deeply. Things were already out of control. 2 billion people had actively participated in the discussion so far. And in a single day, most of the population would know the truth. In this case, someone has to bear the responsibility. Julius' eyes turned cold. Huh? As he was about to select some useless Xanders as scapegoats, he noticed another trend on social media. Don't tell me. Julius' eyes widened as a terrifying guess began to form in his mind. The new trend was the resurfacing of the old post where Varian beat up the relatives of Shadow Guardian. Let us not kill these scum, but torture them. Those were his words, which people at that time agreed with. Not anymore. Instead, with the resurfacing of this post, people turned more and more against the violence. They called for the safety of the Shadow Guardians' relatives and absolutely condemned the Xanders for arresting these innocent people in the first place. Once the discussion turned in that direction, two people naturally came up. Xander, deputy head of the Xander family. Princess Iris Xander, the second best genius of the Xanders. Previously, due to a mysterious push in social media, Xander got extremely popular for his strong condemnations against Guardians. Seeing the opportunity, Xander's family announced that he was the one responsible for the extermination of Shadow Guardians. At that time, this decision made perfect sense. Not only did it consolidate Xander's own fame, but it also elevated the Xander family's status. The same went for Princess Iris Xander. She was also promoted as the new voice against terrorism. Later, many reports were leaked into social media showing her valor when she killed many Shadow Guardians who were escaping from the persecution. The videos where she killed men, women, and children alike without batting an eye were previously seen as heroic. But now, she was only seen as a cold-blooded viper. Because, just recently, people came to learn that Shadow Guardians weren't actually terrorists but actually heroes in the shadows. They also learned that this was an open secret in the military. This also meant that these two Xander members knew that Guardians were innocent, yet killed them. It was a cold-blooded murder for fame. Once they realized this, the public opinion, which previously was overwhelmingly towards Kale and Iris, turned on its head. As they say, the higher you climb, the greater you fall. The more people respected them in the past, the more they hated them now. As a result, an unprecedented hate campaign started against these two members of Xanders. Their gazes were all different, but with one similarity. Shock. It was unbelievable what Varian was able to accomplish in a matter of days. He changed the public opinion of not only Enigma but also Shadow Guardians, and now, he's demonizing two core members of the Xander family. Previously, Enigma and Blue Flash didn't understand why Varian artificially raised the reputations of Kale and Iris. Now that they finally did, they felt a chill down their spines. His move was a deliberate political trap for the Xanders. They took the bait and publicly admitted their actions against Guardians. Not only that, they even exaggerated and attributed more achievements to these two. Now, every one of that achievements turned into a sin. Of course, Varian could have chosen not to bring up these two people into the limelight and could have still proceeded with the plan. But then, Xanders could have easily escaped from this issue by sacrificing two useless Xander members. Now, their hands were tied. The people in question were the second most important in both the old and new generations. Kale Xanders was the strongest after Julius. Iris Xander was the best genius after Charles. But now... when did you become so scary? Kyle gulped and asked his friend, whose smile didn't seem to vanish. Scary? Me? Varian pointed to his face with an innocent smile. Don't be kidding. I'm the good guy of the town. Enigma rolled her eyes while Blue Flash and Maya shook their heads in exasperation. Varian clicked his tongue at their reactions and crossed his arms. You guys are seriously boring. Why can't you enjoy the situation? Blue Flash stared at him intensely before sighing. The people think everything is happening separately. She squinted her eyes and continued. Gamma potion is found by Enigma. Blocker proof is invented by Uranus head scientist. Shadow Guardian's topic was naturally brought to the limelight, not by any artificial agency. But they don't know, it's all you're doing. One person did all this. In the end, her stare at him turned into a complex one, as if she was seeing an absurd existence. If they know, they won't enjoy the situation. They will be shocked and they will be numb. Like us. She said, and her shoulders slumped. Varian rubbed his chin and nodded. I'm taking that as praise. Thank you very much. Sarah threw a pillow at him. Hey. Varian caught it and looked at her in confusion. Can't I praise myself? We've reached the secret realm already. She said lightly and gave him a glance. Oh, and please continue to praise yourself. I will record them all, for the future. Varian froze, imagining Sarah showing these embarrassing moments. Never mind. He glanced out the window and realized that they did indeed reach a secret realm near Uranus. After the news blew up, Varian once again asked Irene for help regarding the teleportation formations. If it was before, she wouldn't be able to help as the Sovereigns kept her actions under monitoring. But with the Enigma threat proven as fake, there were no such restrictions. So, the ghost ship once again reached Uranus. This time too, once they reached here, Enigma couldn't suppress the tracker any longer and gave off the signal. But contrary to the previous times, they weren't chased. In fact, the public came out into the streets and cheered for them. Enigma. Dreamer. It was truly a sight that even he didn't expect, much less the rest. Nonetheless, it was very heartwarming. Irene also ordered the military to turn off the trackers. So, Ghost Ship traveled unhindered towards their destination. A secret realm owned by trade union. In a few minutes, Ghost Ship was above a tall building. Whoosh! Whoosh! Blue Flash exited the Ghost Ship and entered it in a second. But this time, she was throwing a young man in her hand. He crashed to the ground and rolled like a log before eventually stopping. Raising his head, he yelled. Hey! Who are you guys, Dreamer? Enigma? The man recognized the two people in the room. Like the rest, they were also wearing masks, but these two were famous with their masks on. You're not a fool. Varian nodded in acknowledgement. Between their words, Ghost Ship already left the secret realm, and in a matter of seconds, the people that were chasing after them were thrown off. Release me. The handsome man growled. Do you know who I am? Head of Uranus Trade Union Branch. Varian smiled. Also the husband of Sovereign Vian. The man growled. Correction, one of the 10 or 11 husbands she has. Varian clicked his tongue. If you die, she'll replace you, don't worry. You. Veins popped up on the man's forehead as he felt a vulnerable issue of his life being poked. Shut up, Varian said lightly, but the man flinched and shivered. A huge, terrifying force entered his mind and nearly scared the living hell out of him. The power of a telepath. But as the head of the Uranus branch, he wasn't an ordinary man. He calmed himself down and asked the most pressing question. What do you want from me? We have a scientist, you see. Varian chuckled, recalling Dr. Thomas, who was tasting torture after torture every day. I asked him to make something. Essentially, a treasure to break Enigma's tracker. He agreed. The young man, who in fact, was already 70 years old, raised his voice. Oh yes, he did. Even with a smile. Varian grinned. In exchange for freedom? The young man asked with anticipation. He felt that he'd also faced the same choice as that scientist. So, it was better to know. Freedom? Don't make me laugh. Varian held his stomach and laughed before he suddenly stopped, stared into the young man's eyes, and said in a chilling tone. In exchange for death. Hiss. The young man took a step back as he felt a shiver down his spine. The hair on his neck stood up and he nearly cried there. Ah, come on, man. Varian frowned. Anyway, our scientist asked us for materials. A lot of precious materials. I need it. But, even if it's me. The union leader still wanted to bargain. As expected of the dark-hearted profiteer. Varian raised a brow. The union leader put on a pitiful face and looked at him in grief. He looked like a righteous officer that was bullied by gangsters. Oh fuck it. You really think you're a saint or something? Varian sneered. A lot of smuggling happens in the black markets from Valos City. And guess what? Some of the top brass of the trade union helped black market from the start. I even got documented evidence for it. There is a certain head also involved in it. The young man looked at Varian's smile and felt that it resembled a demon. Now, you either get hanged for your crimes or you help me get the materials and I might let you live. Choose carefully. Fine, I'll do it. Say that again? Yes, sir. Despite a murder, they didn't receive the death penalty. Why? Because they were powerful awakeners. This society is rotten to the core. This cancer, I will personally cure it by killing it. That thought drove Thomas to attain a level in the scientific community that was only below the unrivaled genius Roxana. Of course, Thomas didn't think he was inferior to Roxana. Their fields of research were simply too different to compete. I'm not inferior to her. Yes, you aren't inferior to her. The sudden voice would have caused him to jump in fright, only if his legs were still working properly and his body still functioned properly. Unfortunately, neither of those was true. Varian glanced at the figure that was hunched over, working on materials on a metal table. He forgot how many bones he had to break, how many drugs Boo administered, and how much pain he inflicted. But he broke Dr. Thomas. He made the man who wholeheartedly worked for the destruction of humanity beg for death. Cool. With a painful grunt, Thomas moved his body and turned around. With each passing second, he felt as if a knife was piercing his bone, as if a fire was burning his lungs, as if deep cold ice was freezing his blood all at the same time. But more than these physical pains, he was repeatedly inflicted with serious mental trauma, dreaming about the incidents and events he didn't want to see. So, when he looked at the man who caused him this trauma, his body froze in fear and his bloodless face paled further. Please. He begged for mercy. I don't want to live anymore. Varian stared at him for a moment before he burst out laughing. Ha 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 ha. Ahaha, arg. But his laughter suddenly turned into a deep roar filled with rage and pain. He slapped his palm and holograms popped up, filling the gloomy room. Horrifying, desperate, and pleading screams rang throughout. We helped you. We killed shadow orders. Damn it. Spare my child. He can't even talk. My mother, please, she only saved others from the order. She never killed anyone. Spare her, I beg you. Sir. Please, sir. Let my wife escape. I swear she'll never let out a wa. Arg. Varian closed his eyes to prevent himself from seeing the visuals of the Shadow Guardian's destruction. Yet, it was as if his mind was unwilling to spare him. The bloodied, crying and horrified faces of the men, women, and children surfaced in his mind. As they got killed like cattle by the same soldiers they helped, the rage he suppressed deep inside his heart erupted like a volcano, and a mental wave shot at Thomas. Arg! With a shriek of agony, Thomas collapsed onto the table, his eyes turning white as blood started to leak out of his ears, nose, and mouth. Varian snapped out of his rage and withdrew his mental power. With a light tap in the empty air, a bot injected a few drops of healing potion into Thomas. The top living scientist staggered up and glanced around in confusion. In mere seconds, he regained his focus. The first thing he did was crouch on the ground and cover his face. Please kill me. A sense of disgust rose from the bottom of Varian's heart as he cursed. If you hadn't cooperated with the Abyssals and made that space device, I'd have killed you painlessly. His eyes turned red as he spat. But you fucking piece of shit. You knew the Guardians would be killed. You not only didn't stop the plan, you even helped them. Thomas froze for a moment as regret filled every fiber of his being. Why? If I knew this would happen, I wouldn't dare. Now bear the pain of those you killed. Their despair, their fears, their pleadings. I'll imprint them into your mind. Varian said with a chilly gaze. In his eyes, there were no emotions. Pure indifference mixed with bloodlust. This was a side he never showed to his people. Thomas felt as if his skin was prickled under that piercing gaze. But he slowly stood up and got back to testing the complex items on the long table. The holograms activated and he studied the readings with all his focus so as to escape his pain. This was Varian's condition for his death. Break Enigma's tracker. To any other human scientist, it was nigh impossible. To him, however, it was only a matter of how long. But the prerequisite was that he had sufficient equipment, that included some of the priciest equipment in the Federation. That's why Varian went out of his way and kidnapped Uranus Trade Union's chief and extorted the equipment. He could have asked Irene, but since he had an alternative, he didn't want to burden her. This finishes all the equipment on your list. Varian flicked his finger and a storage ring landed on the table. Thomas checked the materials and nodded stiffly. Good. I hope to hear the good news in a day. Varian declared, but Thomas's face scrunched up and he opened his mouth. 1 hour delay means you have to go through the pain of 50 more martyred Guardians. Varian's words caused him to shut his mouth and nod vehemently. With a final glance, Varian walked out of the gloomy room. When he did, a warmth embraced him as he felt a weight pressed against his chest. You were watching, weren't you? He hugged her and asked lightly. She nodded, her face still pressed against his chest as she muttered softly. I saw it all, you were so scary. Varian stiffened before replying. I never thought I was capable of torturing a person like that, of breaking someone. But his deeds, I can neither forget nor forgive. Even if he begs, cries, and pleads, the Shadow Guardians aren't coming back. Tens of thousands of lives, years of aspirations, and unimaginable hard work. This guy was the mastermind. He killed them all. My blood boils whenever I think of their deaths. I will not give him an easy death. I might sound inhuman and even crazy, but I swear I can't help but smile when I hear his screams. As his emotions got the better of him, his arms were applying a lot of force on her waist. Realizing this, Varian was about to draw back his hands. I'm sorry, I was just too caught up in. Sarah pulled his hands back to their position and looked up into his eyes. Her face blossomed with a beautiful smile full of trust and affection. I'm a body awakener too. I'm strong enough to take your hugs, even if they're forceful and tight. She chuckled. Varian then hugged her tightly and whispered in a tired tone. Then I honestly need a tight hug. Sarah wrapped her arms around him and patted him lightly. While she tried to console his tired heart, her own heart ached as her eyes turned red. You'll soon reach level 7 and even level 8. For long can I bear your tight hugs before you grow too strong? But they too knew that the dead weren't coming back. And they also knew that they killed their own heroes. So, dark emotions began to pile up in the hearts of every human. Rage, frustration, grief, regret. All of these mixed and churned in their hearts like lava that was about to erupt out of a volcano. The lava, the negative emotions, if erupted, needed to be directed somewhere. Without venting, it was impossible to cool down the rage of an entire race. But luckily, they didn't erupt. Until another post appeared on the meta-net and became the final nail in the coffin. The videos were posted by Dreamer himself and showed the truth of Valos' war. Contrary to what the Federation claimed, it wasn't just the army that saved humanity. No. Shadow Guardians also played an irreplaceable role. And as Dreamer released evidence of every event of Valos' conspiracy one by one, the deceptive plant creatures, the black market, the planned bomb blasts on space cities, and more, the public was dumbfounded. What they knew was merely the tip of the iceberg, and now, this man just shoved down fricking proverbial iceberg down their throat. While they had many questions, many doubts, their emotions and curiosity were attracted by one truth. So, that's it. Shadow Guardians, along with the army, saved the entire humanity from destruction. If they didn't help, the cluster cities would have blown up. Neptune would have been isolated. We didn't even know much they paid for this. How many lives were sacrificed for this noble mission? But what did they get in return? They were brutally murdered by the same army they helped. And with this, Varian finally pushed public opinion to an irreversible point. From here on, no amount of damage control, no amount of PR, no amount of virtue signaling would be able to stop their rage. It truly was if a volcano erupted at the heart of humanity. The lava called rage traveled from the most passionate to even the most disinterested man. Soon, the 50 billion human race was seething in rage. Like Varian planned, this rage was unstoppable and had to be directed at someone. Yes, I personally oversaw the execution of Shadow Guardians. An old man said in a majestic voice. I killed the Shadow Guardians that were lurking on other planets. A young woman raised her head and chuckled in pride. Xander and Princess Iris Xander. The two people that Varian pushed into the limelight, the two people who openly admitted their heroic deeds against Guardians, became the perfect target for public anger. Kill these bastards. Traitors. That wench. She killed children and kids in hiding. Those kids don't even know their parents are the Guardians. That old bastard is worse. The whole army knows how much the Guardians helped and literally saved the world. Yet, he still ordered their extermination. Even if they thought Enigma was a threat, how can they justify killing our own heroes? This guy isn't a human. He isn't qualified. Kill him. That wench too. She'll be the same as him when she grows up. Kill them together. Kill them both. #kill protests began in all parts of the solar system. From Mercury to Neptune, from the smallest space station to the largest space city, people took to the streets and asked for the kill. By this time, their emotions were the main drivers behind their actions. Some of the public realized that the way these posts were released, the order, the content, and the timing, all seemed like a deliberate setup for this end goal. But they were only a minority, and even if their reasoning was accepted by the media, people didn't stop. Do you really expect us to believe someone could control Enigma, Dreamer, Uranus head scientist, and even the army footage from Valos? And even if it was really true, what if it was someone's agenda? What if it was all controlled? Whoever the person, whatever the reason, what they showed was the absolute truth. The flames of anger grew rapidly and finally turned so terrible that even the Xander family had to bow its head. Kill. Under the bright sun, a man and woman knelt on the ground in a secret realm. In front of them were freshly constructed graves, covered in flowers, letters, and many more. These were the graves of the Shadow Guardians, and this was their largest secret realm, also the place where most of them were brutally murdered. Kill. Kill. The secret realm's entrance was broken during the army's attack. So, the huge crowd numbering in 100,000 and the larger crowd viewing this virtually, in literal billions, could see everything clearly. And when they saw these two humans, their blood boiled. Kill. Justice. Sinners. With a large group of Xander family members behind him, Julius bowed to the graves. He put on a regretful expression and gritted his teeth until blood dripped down his lips. The crowd, even with their rage, calmed down for a moment. They realized that, as the recent news suggested, Sovereign Julius knew nothing of this tragedy. According to the most trusted news channels, he was mostly in seclusive training and only came out for the Gamma Expo. After the truth was out, he was the first who decided to bring his own uncle and niece to justice. People of Earth and people of the Federation, Julius addressed the huge crowd, his sonorous voice reaching even the most distant member. We, the Xanders, have sinned. He bowed lightly, and following him, the rest of the Xanders bowed. This Everyone was shocked, but Julius didn't care. He looked down and glared at the two people kneeling in front of the graves. Now, we Xanders will wash off this sin with the blood of these sinners. As he said those words, a long axe appeared in Julius' hand. With my own hands, I'll kill them in a brutal way to set an example. Whoa. Go. Yes. The crowd cheered in joy and surprise. Whoosh. As Julius swung down the axe, people stared transfixed at the scene. To him, however, time seemed to slow down. Julius' extraordinary perception covered the entire secret realm and he recognized it as the one he personally visited. And here was also the place he killed those two peak level 9s. Now, I'm killing the strongest Xander other than me and the best Xander genius other than Charles. Julius shuddered in anger and frustration. He hated all of this. This was all clearly and cleverly orchestrated by Dreamer, no, Varian. Yet, here he was. Despite being a sovereign, he was forced to swing his axe at the pillars of his own family. At the last moment, Julius saw Kale and Iris looking at him with vengeful eyes. Kale's lips muttered something only he could hear while Princess Iris conveyed her message through her telepathic powers. Father Killer. You will die a dog's death. You'll never be the human emperor. Whoosh. Thick, sticky, and hot blood spurted into the air and splashed on his face. As the crowd cheered, Julius touched the blood on his face and had a premonition. It had just begun. Varian sized up the streets in front of him with a scrutinizing gaze. He was staring at the streets that used to be slums just a few weeks ago. A few weeks ago. The streets had narrow and dirty roads. Hawkers camped on either side of the narrow road and made it narrower. Garbage starting from food wrappers to toxic material was strewn across the roads. The cleaning bots that worked here were too inefficient to make difference and the ones that could actually make a difference were too expensive. The people were poor and moved around with lowered heads and desolate gazes. Broken, cracked buildings used to stand on either side of the narrow street. They were the homes, the schools, the shops. To many, it was their whole world. Come on. Kyle's words snapped Varian out of his gaze. But the streets. He pointed to the slums, no, where the slums used to be. All he could see now were buildings so exquisite that they could cause famous architects to orgasm on sight. The streets, the neighborhood, the buildings, they were only a step away from shining from the cleanliness. Everything had changed. And changed in what seemed to be only a blink of an eye. Commercial streets, training halls, and beautiful apartments filling his sight caused him to freeze in his tracks and immediately use his mental power to check if he was caught in an illusion. It's been 10 minutes already, dude. Kyle rubbed his forehead as he groaned in frustration. Maya conversed with her father, not minding the trouble Kyle was facing, even enjoying it a bit. Yeah. Varian nodded reluctantly and glanced at the crowd one last time. The people were perhaps the most unchanged group. They wore good clothes, traveled by either hoverbike or cars, but quite a few of them actually walked. From time to time, their gazes lowered like in the past, but quickly, they raised their head and walked forward with a smile. Hey. The joyous screams of children from the apartment sounded from time to time. Varian was noticeably tired after everything he went through. But even his tired face brightened up at the joyful atmosphere. With a smile on his face, he left the street. Your new home is beautiful, Varian said while glancing at the two-floor villa in the quiet neighborhood. He was currently in the front yard of the villa and facing a woman with red hair in an office dress. My students helped me out a bit, Edwina said with an embarrassed expression. Even though she was a teaching assistant in Miracle Academy and was one of the decent earners in Valos, she couldn't forget this villa at her age. Her part-time profession as a shadow guardian didn't pay anything except for the costs. Students helping out their teacher isn't anything to be embarrassed about. Varian smiled in comfort. Wait, are you really X82-7 as? Edwina looked at him warily. You seriously memorized my code name? Varian gawked at her, to which she seriously nodded. Even though she knew him, it was with a rather ordinary face. Of course, that was a disguise. The current guy in front of her had a very handsome face. Was it a disguise too? No, it doesn't matter, but is it really him? His first mission was to stop Betty's kidnapping, but he stopped the entire war. He earned her respect and admiration. Considering that they even worked together, at least in name, she should have received him warmly. But she didn't. She couldn't. Because her senses were screaming one thing. Danger. The last time she saw him, even though he was level 6, he didn't pose a threat to her. But now, it was almost as if he could slap her to death. How can he be the same person? There's no way anyone can grow so strong so fast. Her suspicions deepened and her fingers stretched towards her comm, ting. Her comm rang right then and she almost jumped on the spot. Glancing at him awkwardly, she checked her comm, only to be surprised. It was Enigma's message, confirming that the young man in front of her was indeed the same person. His strength got something to do with miracle potion. Don't delve too much into it. Enigma's explanation convinced her and she finally believed him. Varian didn't know that Enigma thought of the problem he might face and solved them. He requested with a small smile. Please take care of them. You're really trusting me? Edwina crossed her arms and glanced at the two people behind this junior shadow guardian. He was too mysterious. What about his friends? Hello. Nice to meet you. Kyle and Maya waved at her with a smile. They were a bit handsome and beautiful, but other than that, they seemed perfectly normal. But can someone with him be normal? Edwina didn't think so. In fact, her guess was on spot. No one and absolutely no one around Varian was normal. Be it Enigma, Blue Flash, Sarah, Kyle, or even Maya. But the biggest abnormality of them all was Varian himself. They have circumstances and need to live in a safe place for a long time. I think Valos is a good place. It isn't too strict nor too loose. Varian explained. Kyle and Maya nodded. He said living with you can make our lives easier. So, we'll be troubling you. Of course, we can help you however we can. You guys aren't afraid that I might be a sinister woman? Edwina pointed to her face and said in confusion, not forgetting to add. Though admittedly, someone as pretty won't seem sinister. Maya squinted her eyes and glanced at Kyle. Kyle looked at her with an innocent expression. She's delusional. You're the pretty one. Humph. I will barely accept your words. The couple silently conversed through their gazes. Unlike them, Varian had to use words. I told them about you. So, you can stop your pranks. Varian shrugged. Ugh. Edwina groaned in frustration and gestured to them. Come in. The trio entered the home and to their surprise, found a guy and girl laughing in the living room. Stop, ha ha ha. The girl laughed while clutching her stomach, cheerful energy oozing out in her laughter. But the way she dressed and the temperament she exuded indicated that she was of noble origins. I'm not stopping until you beg for Merc, the boy chuckled before a pillow hit him in the face. The girl covered her mouth and was about to laugh when she heard footsteps. Her smile froze and she hurriedly sat on the sofa. The boy rushed next to her. The girl stared at the question sheet on her hologram and seemed immersed. Meanwhile, the boy browsed through a hollow book. Tap. 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 Light footsteps sounded before a woman in red hair and office dress appeared in the room. Following her was Varian's trio. Seriously. Varian rolled his eyes at the couple's behavior. If not for his keen senses, he would have thought these two were serious students. I am always first from last in academics. How can he expect me to get first from first? Viner cried out in protest. Betty nodded vigorously. Yep. We are trying to get him to the top 10. If Dad still pressurizes Viner, I'll show him his own school results. He never reached top 50. She looked like a mother hen protecting her chicks as she shielded Viner behind her. Varian watched this with a surprised expression. He didn't expect this at all. The once arrogant, bratty, and proud Betty changed so much. And this Viner, if he remembered correctly, he chased after her damn hard. So, they finally got together? Happy ending, eh? As the discussion between Edwina and Betty seemed like it could stretch to hours, Varian interrupted. Good to see you two like this. Huh? Viner and Betty just noticed them. You know us? They said together. Varian chuckled. You don't know me. They raised their brows in confusion. Edwina hurriedly said. He's my Kalia friend. I told him about you guys. Ha ha ha. She glared at Varian, to which he simply shrugged. Yeah. These two are also her friends and they'll live here from now on. He pointed to Kyle and Maya. As if on cue, Maya wrapped her arms around her Edwina and said to Viner and Betty. We're really good friends for 40 years. Don't be modest. It's 60 years. Kyle said with an honest expression. But they don't even look 20. Viner and Betty glanced at each other. Cough. Cough. Coughing lightly, Varian wished to slap these two guys. They're joking. Haha. Viner let out a friendly laugh to ease the awkwardness. Yes, we're joking. Maya realized they went overboard and nodded. Yes, we're joking. It's not just 60 years, ouch. Kyle, the idiot, was about to say 80, thankfully, Maya pinched him to silence. I'll show you your rooms, then. Edwina said to the trio. After she was done, Varian asked her for the basement. On the way, he also explained a few essential things. They're researchers? Edwina was both surprised and suspicious. Well, kinda. Kyle shrugged. The door to the basement opened and closed as they entered. Now what? Don't be too surprised, Varian said, and without waiting for her answer, snapped his finger. Hi everyone. Nice to meet you. I'm Tom. An old man in white clothes appeared in front of them and said with a cheerful expression. What the? Edwina sucked in a cold breath and stared at Varian in shock. Living objects can't be stored in storage rings. So, how? But more importantly, who's this guy? Varian turned to Kyle and Maya, who seemed to be more surprised by the old man's condition than his appearance. Long story short. Boo and I did a number on him. He broke and lost all his memories of self. But voila! His knowledge and skills are still there. My treatment of him was also particularly focused on his self, so maybe that's why. Anyway, use him good for your projects. Varian said with a nonchalant expression. Kyle gulped his saliva and stared at the world's best scientist alive today. Hee, how are you? I am Tom. Let's be friends, okay? The top scientist giggled like a child. Hiss. Kyle flinched and took a step backward. Maya looked at Dr. Thomas with a complicated expression. This guy was both her father's rival but also his superior. She turned to Varian and asked. Are you fine with it? During their meals and snack breaks, she and Varian caught up on many matters. Of course, Kyle too. Varian revealed that Enigma had to go through unimaginable pain to suppress the tracker, and that was one of the reasons why he tortured Dr. Thomas so badly. So, by leaving him alive, was he really okay with it? At Maya's questioning gaze, Varian smiled meaningfully. I did think of killing him, but isn't death too easy of an escape? Regardless of his actions, his intellect is unquestionable. So, it's better to keep him alive and use his brains to do something helpful to society. Do you think we can use him properly? Maya said in a weird tone. Well, I trust you, Varian smirked. Without CTF, we wouldn't have gotten anywhere. Trust me too. Kyle protested. Nah, bro, show me some results other than those metal armors. Varian waved his hand like he was bored. I just needed some experience to solve some bottlenecks. But now that I have Tom, I will show you the results soon. Kyle raised his chin to the sky and bragged as if he was the one solving the bottlenecks instead of Tom. Do tell me once you're done. Maya's invention helped us a lot. I'm expecting something as good from you. You bet. Edwina watched in silence as the trio engaged in a conversation, almost ignoring her existence. Wait, this is my home. And they are the guests. But why am I feeling like a guest? Oh yeah, Edwina, Varian called out, startling her. Huh. Take it. Varian flicked his finger and a small black cube appeared in her hand. What's this? The remote. Varian also gave the same black cubes to Maya and Kyle. To what? They asked simultaneously. Varian smiled and pointed to Dr. Thomas, no, Tom, who was smiling at them innocently. If this guy ever regains his memories, press it. He said with a peaceful expression. Will it knock him out? Edwina guessed. Well, it will mentally torture him until he's knocked out, Varian admitted with a straight face. Torture, how much? She asked hesitantly. Not much, really. Varian shrugged. He'll just experience the gruesome death of a dozen people in his mind. Other than that, he'll be fine. Edwina felt a shiver down her spine. All right, keep this guy's secret from everyone or you'll all be fucked. Varian said to Edwina with a serious expression. Uh-oh. Edwina nodded stiffly, realizing that she might get into trouble if things went wrong. Don't worry, I'm not an ungrateful person. If you ever need any help that doesn't conflict with my interests, I'll help you. He looked into her eyes and said with a serious expression. For your own good, I'm adding this. The longer you hold on to that favor, the more valuable it becomes. A month from now, I might help you a lot. But a year from now, probably neither you nor even I can imagine. He said with full conviction. Even though she didn't want to, his mysteriousness, his confidence, and his rising strength caused Edwina to believe in his words, even if only to a small extent. Well then, see you. Varian waved at them and left. We're tired. We'll rest for the night. See you. Kyle and Maya retired to their rooms. Only Edwina was left standing. So, she realized what seemed like a normal conversation wasn't really normal. He didn't leave them just because he trusted her, but because he was confident I wouldn't harm them. He used both the carrot and stick on me. The carrot, his favor. Even if she didn't believe in his own strength, she still knew that he was related to Enigma. That was enough of a favor. The stick, his threat. For some reason, she felt that while he trusted her, his last words were a subtle warning. Edwina didn't know then, but her guess was once again on spot. Kyle and Maya seemed to be doing fine. Even though it seemed a bit too early to conclude, Varian wasn't too worried. Because while the idea to drop off Kyle and Maya at a safe location was his, the one who decided the location was the frustrated woman in front of him. They keep calling me and the marshals are all asking for a deep invis. Varian ignored her words and glanced at her with a smile. Blue Flash was the one who picked Edwina as the safe haven. She did plenty of background checks already and in her own words. Even when most of the Shadow Guardians were against Enigma, Edwina was standing firmly with us. I can entrust my son's life to her. Varian decided to believe in her. After all, despite not being a mom who can spend time with her son, she did care about his safety. Well, I did run background checks on Edwina. Varian did it without Blue Flash's knowledge. Even though he trusted Blue Flash's competence and intent, he had to be sure. So, not only did he run to dig up Edwina's past but also gave her an open favor along with a covert threat. I feel bad. Varian sighed deeply and covered his face. Because of him, the lives of people closest to him were thrown into chaos. In the foreseeable future, they wouldn't be able to return to their normal life. No. Until I can crush Julius, he can always target them. Varian felt worse, realizing that it might actually take long. Even for him, reaching the sovereign state wasn't easy. But there was almost a cross-dimension level difference between others and him. While everyone else would think, can I reach a sovereign state, few were confident. Even they knew it'd take many decades. How many months? That was Varian's thought. If anyone, even the frustrated Blue Flash, knew his thoughts, she'd drop everything at hand and start beating him up. Months? What months? It takes a lifetime and we still aren't sure. But of course, Varian was Varian. Status, Body Path Level 6, 2/6 Space Path Level 6, 3/6 Lightning Path Level 6, 2/6 Morpher Path Level 6, 2/6 Telepath Path Level 6, 2/6, +2, Telekinetic Path Level 6, 1/6, +1, Water Path Level 5, 0/2000, Advanced. Varian noted the changes and nodded to himself. The torture on Dr. Thomas was also an exercise for him. He had to be careful with the amount of force he was using and how he was using it. For the same reason, the telekinetic path also improved. Sarah helped me advance in the water path. Varian's lips curled up. She taught and fought me until I advanced. But his smile vanished as he recalled her little, but strange cues. When she congratulated him, Sarah was genuinely happy. He could feel it. But along with the happiness, there was another emotion. Fear. What is she scared of? Varian didn't understand. My increasing strength won't bring her any harm, then why? Due to his almost perfect memory, he recalled her face. She had a bright smile on her face as she congratulated him, but her eyes were filled with anxiety and fear. Could it be because of Sia? Varian felt it might be the case. The stronger he was, the closer he was to reaching Sia. That meant, hey! The loud call shook Varian out of his thinking. Yes? Are you listening at all? Blue Flash placed her arms on her hips and leaned forward. She looked like a frustrated housewife who wanted to rant about her daily problems. Varian would have been fine if that was the case. But the problems she talked about were Federation level and something he currently couldn't bother with. I'm totally listening, Varian said with a face so full of honesty that he put even the real honest people to shame. Oh really? Blue Flash smiled, her smile wasn't so kind. What was my mission again? Investigate the Xanders, find out the crucial information about the Gamma Potion and control the public sentiments, Varian said with a confident face. You. Blue Flash opened her mouth in shock. How did he? She was pretty sure he wasn't listening. Varian snickered at her reaction while inwardly thanked his cute ghost. Boo was listening to everything through his calm, thanks, Boo. You deserve a million simps. Hee hee. Then I will simp for you, master. What? Just don't. Yes. So, I have to go back to Athena Group. Blue Flash sighed in exasperation. Her shoulders slumped as she collapsed next to Varian. If she wasn't this frustrated, she'd thought of Boo's role instantly. With the intention to console her, Varian patted her shoulder lightly. That's your main job, though. Blue Flash glared at him. What? Varian shrugged with an innocent expression. I'm worried. Blue Flash collapsed on the sofa like a hollowed balloon. They are all newbies. Even though the old guys on our side returned, there are only a few of them. I'm afraid they can't the newbies do simple missions. He'll train them well, don't worry, Varian assured her. He is a lazy man himself, but he makes everyone else sweat till the last drop. Sweat more during peace and bleed less during the war. Those words were his justifications. Blue Flash stared at him for a while before nodding. He's the best choice we have. Well then. Blue Flash sighed and her body disappeared before appearing at the ghost ship's exit. Varian also teleported after her. Blue Flash stared into Varian's eyes intensely and said. I am really awaiting our next meeting." With those words, she jumped out. "The Xanders are still looking for you." Varian cupped her cheeks and looked at her seriously. "In fact, if we were a few minutes late, they'd have caught you." While Kyle and Maya were also pursued, those two wouldn't go out. Edwina would take care of such things. But Sarah, she insisted on training and combat outside. This was very dangerous. Varian still couldn't forgive himself for what happened to Sia, so he didn't want Sarah to take such risks. "Boo told me that they infiltrated my dorm." Sarah sighed. "Yes, so it's danger, so I am going to use a good disguise. Boo gave it to me." Sarah held up a plain mask and put it on her face. Her beautiful face, shining blonde hair, and blue eyes changed into a rather ordinary face with gray eyes and purple hair. "But can it hide you from powerful awakeners?" Varian said in a worried tone. "Don't be afraid," Sarah said softly and held his hands over her cheeks. Slowly, she laid their hands on the table and interlocked their fingers. "What?" Varian asked in confusion. "You are very worried about me." "Of course, I am. Because you think I'll face situations like Sia." Sarah looked into his eyes and said word by word. Varian was at a loss for words. Sarah pressed her hand lightly and Varian paused. Her hands were cold, like the ice attacks she always used. But he felt a sense of warmth. As he looked into her eyes, they seemed to say, "I'll be fine. And Sia, it's not your fault." Varian looked away and sighed. "I have a disguise mask Enigma gave me. It works even for high awakeners." "You can, I don't need it," Sarah said. "Huh? Boo said that I can hide my identity from level 9s with this mask." Sarah freed her hands and held up the mask again. "Level 9? You sure?" Varian raised a brow. "Boo made it from the scrapped parts, apparently," Sarah said in an awkward tone. Ghost ship nearly breaking apart wasn't pleasant news to be reminded of. Varian stiffened for a moment as his eyes reflected pain before he turned back to normal. "Boo, this is very important. Can I trust you on this?" Varian said to thin air, but a cute voice answered. "Yes, master." "Fine." Varian finally sighed. Sarah stood up and walked to the exit. Her hands were tightly clenched. If she had a choice, she didn't want to go. "For myself and for him, I must." When she was about to leave, she felt a warm hand holding her hand from behind. She suppressed the sad expression on her face and smirked. "Missing me already?" Varian lightly pulled her around and said with a serious expression. "Don't do anything too dangerous. Don't contact Master from a normal comm. Use the spare comms lavishly, but don't take unnecessary risks. Don't help people without caution. Anne." As Varian continued on and on, Sarah stared at him with a bright smile. Bit by bit, the reluctance and sadness in her heart dissipated. She couldn't register his words. All she saw was him concerned to the point he started speaking way more than he usually would. "Yes. A short separation for a better reunion. For our future, this much is nothing. And potion." A soft hand covered Varian's mouth and stopped him from talking further. He was about to protest when the soft palm on his lips was replaced by a cool, softer, and sweet touch. When Varian returned to his senses, she was already gone. "We're even now, eh?" He chuckled to himself. Earth, a secret realm, stood in the center of a huge crowd. Tens of thousands of people were entering and exiting it each second. It was managed by the Planetary Defense Guard, so despite the presence of a huge crowd, there was no chaos. The AI systems also helped maintain order, making it in a black suit and trousers. Varian entered the secret realm in disguise. He looked at Enigma next to him and clicked his tongue. Dr. Thomas successfully destroyed the tracker on Enigma a few days ago. It was also the last step in Varian's plan. Once it was done, everyone started to go to their own places. Kyle and Maya, Blue, and then Sarah. Finally, only the two of them were left. At Enigma's request, they were at a secret realm of the Guardians, which was now turned into an honorary museum of sorts. I didn't expect I can walk freely again. Enigma lamented in her heart. Whether she showed it or not, the tracker annoyed her as much as it bothered her. So, when the tracker broke, she really felt the joy of liberation. Hey, keep your eyes straight, Varian warned a guy who was gazing at Enigma with sinister intentions. The guy was about to argue, but his head suddenly buzzed and he experienced something more painful than death. So, he shut up and ran away. Varian shook his head and turned to his left. Beside him was a lady wearing a morning dress. A veil covered her face. Even though only her violet eyes and silver hair could be seen, she drew many gazes. Whether she was aware of it or not, she was a stunning beauty. You could have put on one as well. Varian's voice rang in her mind, referring to the face mask. I want to see them as myself. Not with a fake face. Enigma replied in a tone that allowed no refusal. You cover most of your face. Even then, you're stoic. What expressions do you even make? Varian sighed in exasperation. I don't know. Enigma replied as they stepped on a sheet of blue metal. The sheet scanned their comms and after a flash of light, it shot into the air. Whoosh! But now, there were even several statues across the secret realm, depicting the bravest souls. They attracted children the most. These young kids were then taught about the bravery of these warriors. Then there were special regions filled with holograms. They depicted the battles, mostly censored versions, but in some places, the raw versions too. They were mostly visited by teenagers. Their blood boiled at the sight and they vowed to be better citizens. The secret realm was also filled with exquisite buildings spread all over. They shared the history, ideology, and achievements of Shadow Guardians. Most of the adults and the majority of the visitors went to these locations. Then, there was finally a very serene location with a huge gate. Varian and Enigma walked in. Since Varian maintained a considerable distance from her, they looked like strangers. This is. In front of them was a tall stele. It was as tall as a 10-story building and was thick enough to allow hundreds of people to surround it simultaneously. Enigma walked to the pitch-black stone stele and gazed up. The names engraved in white on the stele came into view. Mira, John, Vin. As she read the familiar names, Enigma's eyes reddened and before she knew it, tears dripped from the corner of her eyes and drenched her veil. An overwhelming sadness overcame her as Enigma suddenly collapsed onto her knees. The surrounding men and women were also surprised, but no one came to help her. They could understand her reaction, they too lost someone dear. So, they gave her what she needed the most at the moment. Space. As the surrounding public made some distance, Enigma stared at the stele on her knees. There seemed to be a lump in her throat, but she tried hard to say something. Arg. All that came out was a groan filled with deep grief and pain. Enigma lowered her head and let the tears fall. When she had no more tears to shed, she slowly stood up and offered a single large white flower to the stele. The moment the flower touched the stele, it gave off a soft white light and bloomed before turning into shimmering particles and flying away with the wind. Peace. Enigma sent her final prayers and turned around. She walked to Varian but stopped far enough to not cause a repulsion. Varian stared at her in silence, as if he was knowing her all over again. Enigma parted her lips and said in a hoarse tone, without meaning to. What? Fulfill their wishes. That's the best you can do. He said in a low voice, catching her off guard. Huh? Enigma looked at him in confusion. When someone close to you leaves you forever, the best thing you can do is live a good life for yourself. The next best thing is to fulfill their wish if you can. Varian said with a blurred gaze. As the wind blew gently, he seemed to see the fateful night that turned his life upside down. Enigma noticed his gaze and bit her lip. She nodded lightly and walked out. On the way out, Varian noticed a few things. The Xanders image is damaged. Just like buildings and holograms depicting the goodness of guardians, there were also buildings and holograms depicting the sins of the evil Kale Xander and Iris Xander. It had a subtle effect on the public perception of the Xanders. While they only blamed these two members and not the Xander family, the perfect reputation, the perfect image, the perfect glory that Xanders maintained, it is gone. Varian smirked. This is just the beginning. Why that smirk? Enigma asked with a strange gaze. She didn't seem to like his action in the secret realm. After all, it was easy to misunderstand. I am thinking about the Xanders. Their fall has just begun. Varian said with overwhelming confidence. Your current strength won't help you, Enigma said bluntly. I know. Varian wasn't offended in the slightest and instead explained patiently. So, I plan to grow stronger. As strong as I can. The stronger I grow, the more damage I can inflict. Stronger, huh? What are you going to do? She titled her head lightly. Earth ruins, Varian said nonchalantly, but Enigma froze in place. What happened? Ruins are too dangerous for a level 6. You need to be at least a level 7. Enigma said in a concerned tone. Then she patted her forehead as if she realized something. You want to go there because... Sia. Varian shrugged. It's the 30th of the month already. Before the ruins close, I am confident about finding her. On the way, I can also improve my strengths. Ruins are a good place to grow strong, aren't they? Looking at Varian's confident yet stubborn grin, Enigma didn't know what to say. Out of the 45 days in the third month, 30 were over. It would be significantly harder to search for Sia in Earth ruins in just 15 days. But his stubborn smile told her that he wouldn't back down. The time has finally come. Enigma closed her eyes and sighed. I can advance to level 7 in the ruins. Varian rubbed his chin and continued. And my memories, they're slowly coming back with each passing day. I think I'll be able to get my full memories back once I reach level 7. She'll meet you in the ruins, Enigma said softly. Despite, oh, how come you are so confident? No one can communicate to the outside world once in ruins, no? Varian squinted his eyes. Enigma took a deep breath and stared at him solemnly. She won't run anymore. Varian. Sarah closed her eyes and his face came into her mind. She knew she shouldn't be like this. She should go on a mission right away. She should fight and grow stronger so that she shouldn't fall behind. But there was a lingering reluctance from parting with Varian. And it just didn't vanish. Go back. It'll be fine. Her mind tried to convince her. Sarah shook those thoughts away. If you aren't with him, then Sia will take him. You have no chance against her. You don't even know him for a year, she grew up with him for 7. Sarah, why are you being stupid? When she didn't budge, her thoughts spiraled in a negative direction, in a direction she was scared of. And they did scare her. But Sarah clenched her fists tightly and told herself. I'll trust him. Her insecurity would accomplish nothing. She couldn't watch him every second of the day, right? If something really happens, he'll tell me. Sarah didn't like to pry into others' secrets. Unless it was necessary, she left the choice of revealing their personal information to others. Yet, if there was anyone who knew about Varian's past, other than Boo, Sia, and arguably Enigma, it was Sarah. She knew about his memories, the feud with Xanders, and even his hatred of the two sovereigns. I will destroy the Xanders soon. His cold voice still rang in her mind. Those two sovereigns, they better die, if not, they'll be slaughtered. It was a bold statement. If said in public, it would be considered even treacherous. Yet, he said those words in front of her without any hesitation. So far, Varian did reveal almost everything. She could see that he wasn't hiding anything nor was he trying to. Except his strength. She still couldn't believe the rate at which his strength climbed. From nothing to the peak of level 4 in a day, and recently, he even advanced to level 5. While he seemed to have temporarily stalled in level 5 due to what he called resistance, it was mind-blowing nonetheless. That's his biggest secret. Sarah narrowed her eyes. It shouldn't be told to anyone. It's best if no one else knows. Not even the closest person to him. As she was lost in thought, her comm rang. Ting. Sarah sat up and a hologram popped up in front of her. It was a brawny man in a military uniform. He had a fierce scar running down his cheek. He was perhaps the modern-day Reaper. He'd reap lives, not for pleasure, but for his duty. But the Reaper, the famous Steelheart's eyes showed worry as he looked at his daughter. Father. Sarah greeted him softly. She knew he was very busy these days and felt bad for worrying him. What happened? He asked her gently, but there was a firmness to his voice. After she left, he was secretly delivered a special comm. Then, he was informed that Sarah was fine. It was only after Varian personally called him that he put down his worry. But since Varian was also busy, he didn't elaborate except for informing him about her safety. Thus, while he was relieved, he was anxious to contact her. But his workload suddenly rose and he could only contact her now. Sarah bit her lip as she wondered what she should begin. Varian called her and others because his identity as Dreamer was exposed. But if she said this, it'd also reveal Varian's secret. Varian didn't tell her to reveal it, nor did he ask her to keep it a secret. As she bit on her lip struggling to find an answer, Evander suddenly said. Is he Dreamer? Father? Sarah stared at him in astonishment. But as soon as she realized that her reaction was giving it away, she put on a neutral expression. He. As I thought. Evander sighed in exasperation. Believing something was one thing, but confirming it was another. Even to him, this was a ridiculous thought. Sarah didn't speak and stared at him with curious eyes. Looking at her curious blue eyes, Evander was reminded of her childhood. The same eyes, the same stare. Father, tell me. He could almost hear a cute and lovely voice. Varian asked me for Sovereign Irene's contact, remember? Evander revealed his reasons. But that isn't enough. Sarah tilted her head. Indeed. That's not the only reason. Back when he was in Uranus cluster cities, he asked for Sovereign Irene's contact. Evander narrowed his eyes. According to the recent news, it was Dreamer who contacted Sovereign Irene. Sarah nodded. Varian retold her the whole story. He had to contact her to help him out in the cluster cities, and the only source of her contact was his master. Thankfully, he was quick to respond. If her father had been a bit late, then Irene would have fallen into Despair Queen's trap and would have died. Then. Hiss. Sarah sucked in a cold breath as sweat trickled down her forehead. Sarah? Evander called her in confusion. Are you all right? Is the place you're staying not good enough? I'll find a luxurious PLA, you are a hero, father. Sarah looked at him in respect. You also saved everyone. That's an exaggeration, even though I'm happy to make you proud. Evander coughed lightly to cover up his embarrassment and said. He quickly continued before Sarah could embarrass him any further. At Varian's funeral, I met Varian's close people, remember? Evander said with a weird expression. Varian had a funeral after he died after Solar Trial. He got to know Kyle, Maya, and Gareth there. Yes. Sarah nodded stiffly, her expression completely awkward. While her days after his apparent death were filled with grief, looking back, conducting a funeral for a living person was really a bit too much. Not just that, he already had a funeral after I thought he died in the dungeon. He even had a tomb that had final lines from his best friend. After knowing they were close to Varian, I asked my people to put an eye on them, Evander said, and before Sarah could misunderstand, he added. I wanted to help them out if they had any trouble. After all, they're my disciples' friends, you know? Well. Sovereign Julius attacked Dreamer at Gamma Expo. And soon, Kyle and Maya disappeared. But it was you who went missing and then Varian himself telling me you're safe that confirmed my guess. Evander said with a satisfied smile as if he solved a huge puzzle, which he did. You're right. Sarah finally sighed before she quickly looked into his eyes. So you knew why I disappeared? And you were just testing me? Yes? Evander admitted with a straight face. I wondered if my daughter would tell me the secret, but she didn't. How disappointing. You didn't trust me. He put on a sad face, causing Sarah to feel guilt. It's not that I don't trust you. I am kidding. Evander's expression flipped back to nonchalance as he said in a serious tone. Some secrets must be kept, even from the closest people. Sarah felt a bit weird hearing that from him, but she nodded. Now, what are you going to do? He asked with a concerned expression. While he could arrange forces to protect her, she'd be under constant threat from Sovereign Julius. I am still too weak. I want to grow stronger, quickly. Sarah said with a determined face. What are you saying? Evander was taken aback. You're already the strongest cadet in the second year. No, except for Charles, you are the strongest in the entire academy. If I am being honest, if you participate in the solar trial again and corner Charles like the previous time, you can beat everybody else. Why do you think you are weak? You aren't. Father, Sarah looked at him with a tired expression. No. It wasn't exactly tiredness, but a sense of helplessness. Do you know strong Varian is? He reached level 6 in solar trial. But he grows very fast. So, let me guess. He already reached high level 6. Evander said and smirked at Sarah. Seeing her stoic expression, his smirk vanished as he laughed awkwardly. Well, even for him, it's too unrealistic. I was overestimating him. Actually, you are underestimating HM. Sarah said with a complication expression. You mean? Varian is already as strong as me. What? Now, she was sitting with the 7 sovereigns across an arched table while Julius was standing in front of them. At Sovereign Albert's question, Julius stiffened for a moment and was about to answer. Then, his eyes met Irene's and he saw her lips curling up into a mocking smile. You! Julius clenched his fists so hard that veins started to pop up on his forearms. Getting angry for such a simple question is very unfitting of your image, Sovereign Julius, Ares said in a polite tone, but his words weren't polite at all. My apologizes. Julius took a deep breath and controlled himself from being angrier. There was a place and time for everything. Even for yelling and cursing. This surely wasn't one. At least, not yet. Then please explain, why did you allow such a blunder with Gamma Potion? Sovereign Albert leaned forward and said in a dangerous tone. My researchers weren't competent enough. I will inflict them with capital punishments. Julius pushed all the responsibility away from him. And he did so with a straight face. Shameless. Irene Nile shook her head. If it was really true, then she wouldn't have scorned him. But it wasn't. Because. Then what about the Omega Potions? At Sovereign Ares' words, the hall fell silent. Omega Potions were actually the first potion Roxana came up with. They were also the potions that she used to convince sovereigns to overlook the violations in her research. The sovereigns didn't exactly know what she did. But they did know that she changed the data of one or more people in the central database. Despite her evil actions, Omega Potions seemed well worth the trade. They significantly improved one's progression speed, and increased the chances of advancement even in high awakeners. The oldest test subjects of Omega Potion were almost a year old by now. Compared to their peers, they showed significantly higher progress. By projecting their progress into a decade, it was suggested that they would become the edge of humanity against abyssals. Of course, after learning about the miraculous effects of the potion, the army ordered every produced potion. But then came a problem. Enigma stole our main ingredient. Julius suddenly said one day. She also killed my sister brutally. And that was how Julius finally convinced the sovereigns to designate Shadow Guardians as a terrorist organization, despite their reluctance. But other than that, they didn't agree to other things like targeted army operations, and special funds to find and destroy the Guardians among others. A year went by and after their nagging, Julius said he overcame the dilemma of the main ingredient and was going to introduce the Gamma Potion. Not only is it better, but its main ingredient also can't be cut off from supply by Enigma. Those were his words. But since Gamma Potion itself was proven to be dangerous, do you know how much damage it could cause? Sovereign Ares slammed the table as his whole body was covered in snakes of lightning. If it was any other person, they'd have frozen in fear. But Julius merely glanced at him and shook his head confidently. Gamma Potion is indeed a mistake. But Omega, I can vouch my life for that. It is harmless. And where does your courage come from? My late sister. At Julius' words, the room went silent. I believe in her genius. Even a year after her passing, many of her papers aren't comprehended. The sovereigns looked at each other. They could only hope that it was true. Or else, the High Awakeners that took the Omega Potion would experience mishaps, creating a domino effect that might cause major losses. Fine. Sovereign Irene said in a calm voice before it turned extremely sharp. The main ingredient you talked about, the Gamma Potion, it's the blood of kids. Teenagers. Julius corrected. You are making a potion from human blood. Have you gone insane? Irene growled. Even the sovereigns that were calm until now looked at him with a scrutinizing gaze. They missed their best time to practice. They can't achieve much in their lives. Their lives are better served to push others to the top. Julius said without a shred of guilt. You are killing them. Irene said in a breaking voice. I know. Julius nodded with a straight face. Do you have a bit of conscience, or even humanity left in you? Irene asked with red eyes. Julius, who was calm until then, looked at her dangerously. If it wasn't a virtual conference, it seemed like he'd have attacked her on the spot. The sovereigns also noticed the change and the air tensed up. Finally, Julius said. We are weak. Huh? Do you forget that we almost lost Uranus and Neptune only 2 weeks ago? Julius looked at his peers. If not for the Guardians and Dreamer, we'd have lost. Don't you dare utter their name, Julius Xander. Irene stood up with a menacing glare. Her eyes turned red and she pointed at him with a finger shaking in rage. It was all because of you. You killed them all, bloody bastard. The sovereigns looked at each other and looked back at Julius. Their gazes were also blaming him. I took the safest decision on the information I had, Julius said without backing down. Say you now know that someone is an alien and they can contact their race outside the solar system. What will you do? He asked Irene. I will kill them, Julius said without batting an eye. No matter how well their intentions might seem to be, they can turn against us in the blink of an eye. They are not humans, they are not us. Irene wanted to curse him, but Ares gestured for her to sit down. And she begrudgingly did. Coming back to Gamma Potions, the main ingredient is human blood, right? Sovereign Ares asked. Obviously. And you said Gamma Potion is developed without the main ingredient of the Omega Potion. Ares tapped on the virtual table, but his fingers merely passed through. Yes. So, Ares raised his voice. I think it's feasible that the main ingredient of Omega Potion is also blood. His words caused the sovereigns to raise their brows in surprise while Julius frowned in reflex. And that blood is not human blood, Ares smirked. Enigma's first major event is killing Roxana. So, I think the blood is also Enigma's. She is the one who escaped and that is why she killed Roxana. Julius fell silent. What? Am I wrong? Ares leaned forward and stared at Julius with cold eyes. Julius would have scoffed at Ares at any other time, but under the stare of 7 sovereigns, he had no choice. He kept silent. He couldn't reveal about Sia. It would unravel another threat altogether and might lead to bigger problems. No wonder you hate Enigma and go to the extent of using your power to call her people terrorists and even brutally murder them. Sovereign Albert deeply sighed. Julius didn't reply. You did mistakes, Sovereign Julius. Sovereign Albert said. You have to pay the price. All your Xander family businesses and cooperations on planets other than Earth are hereby terminated. The sovereigns voted in favor of the proposition. Overnight, the Xanders' influence on every other planet other than Earth disappeared. History books would note this as the first step in their fall. It was a significant sum for most people. Not for Misha. As a level 7, she could afford that much. But of course, if she repeatedly broke the rules, her punishment would grow exponentially. Such thoughts didn't even cross her mind as Misha jumped down from her hover car and sprinted to the giant building. The building rested on a blue platform. Once she shot up the stairs, a magnificent building came into sight. It was carved out of pure white stone, supported by 12 pillars with carvings depicting some of the greatest battles of human history. Misha's senses caught a few bots, along with a few men and women carving new scenes at the bottom of the 12th pillar. Rather than calling them carvings, it'd be better to call as paintings that happened to be carved. Misha was curious about the new addition. Each and every addition had great significance. But meeting him was her first priority. So, she turned her gaze away and entered the building through the huge entrance. She moved past the lobby and took the elevator. She saw teary-eyed pairs, mothers and sons, brothers and sisters, husbands and wives, leaving the building on the way up. In every pair, one person seemed like an everyday person while the other looked like a fierce adventurer. However, their steps lacked strength and their bodies were supported by their partner. Yet, their eyes glowed in pride. It's all right. It's all right. Misha calmed herself or tried to. They're all fine. So, nothing will happen to him. She seemed to have calmed down, until she reached the 10th floor where she ran to the second room and dashed in. Matthew. Seeing the figure leaning against a soft chair, her face lit up and she called in joy. The man was taken aback by the shout, and when he turned to see the caller, his surprise only increased. Misha? He called his sister's name in confusion. It had been a while since he uttered that name, and it honestly felt weird. Thank heavens. Misha heaved a sigh of relief seeing he was all right. But looking at his pale face, she held his hand in concern. Did the Bureau neglect your treatment? Damn it. I'll sue them to poverty. She said in a cold and determined voice. Matthew shuddered. Even though his sister in his distant memories was soft and smiling most of the time, he remembered that she used to be stubborn. If he didn't stop her, then she'd really sue the Bureau. They treated me well. It's just. Matthew wanted to explain, but he felt awkward. Since he cut off contact with his family, he thought he'd never see them again. Truthfully, he too knew that as a substance abuser, his family wanted him at arm's length. However, even when he was normal, they weren't close. Even his sister who was closest to him alienated him after she gave birth to her son. He could understand her fears. I don't want my son to have a bad influence. Especially not that of his talentless uncle. So, it came as a surprise that she came here. It's just what? Are you tired? Do you want me to check on your mental status? Misha tapped her forehead and asked. Why are you suddenly worried about me? His voice was cold and even distant, as if he was talking to a stranger and not his own sister. The room fell silent as the siblings stared at each other. It was an awkward silence, but Matthew didn't want fake concerns. I am your sister. Misha finally said. The same sister that stopped me from visiting my nephew 10 years ago. Matthew sighed. But at that time you were. She bit her lip and tried to consider appropriate words. An addict, Matthew said openly. Yes. I was afraid you'd influence him. He was still a kid, so. Misha trailed off. Then what about the years before that, sister? Right after your marriage, when I wasn't into addiction, I approached you many times. Did you even talk to me properly? Matthew slowly stood up and asked. His voice didn't have any sadness, only resignment. Misha wanted to answer but no words came out. In the end, she hung her head in shame. Consciously or unconsciously, she too started treating him like everyone else. He is a low talent. He has given up on himself. He won't achieve much. These were the words she heard about him the most. And at some point, she too believed the same. Her parents too conditioned her to despise anyone with lower talent. While she didn't despise him, as she grew older, their distance certainly grew. And on her own volition. I have a low talent, Matthew said in a mocking tone. Truthfully, if I was born to a normal family, I'd have led a normal life. I'd have reached level 3 or level 4. I'd have made good friends, married a lovely woman, and had wonderful kids. Misha's face paled. She could sense where this was going. But it's my curse to be born in your family. Your expectations were too high that they broke me forever. Matthew said, "You're not our." It was crystal clear that he didn't consider her family anymore. Misha covered her mouth as tears threatened to spill out of her eyes. No, sister. Matthew shook his head. Our bond was long gone. Barry wants to see you, she said in a broken voice. He is also low-talented like you. Just like you, his friends distanced themselves from him. His girlfriend broke up with him. His teachers don't care about him. Matthew's face twisted as he was reminded of his painful past. And even his father despises him. That was the final straw. Matthew kicked the sofa, breaking it into pieces. Your husband is a bastard. Misha wiped the tears from the corner of her eyes and sighed. I know, Barry really looks up to you. You both have the same talent, but you are now level 5. I think only you can help him. Oh, you, I'm sorry. Matthew cut her off. Huh? The only reason you came to me was that you want Barry to reach level 5 too, right? Matthew asked in a straightforward tone. Sure, in terms of strength, they can't compare to mid and high awakeners. But should a person only measure their self-worth through their strength? They can be researchers, businessmen, strategists, heck, there are too many things they could contribute in. Matthew's tone was on the verge of rage. Forget everything. Did you even ask Barry what he wants to become? Not what you want him to? Misha was stunned. Looking back, she never asked him. She did what she thought was best. Not what he actually liked. Your parents are shitty. Don't be like them. Talk to your goddamn son. Matthew walked to the exit and the doors opened. Right when he was about to exit, he paused and said, I know the real reason you visited me. You want the miracle potion of the Shadow Guardians for your son. I don't want to crush your dreams, but I got it only through Enigma's grace. Unless you join the Guardians and risk your life, forget about it. Misha clenched her fists as she looked at her brother's back. And then she thought of her son's bleak face. Yes. She did terrible things so far. She had been both a horrible mother and a horrible sister. Even the concern she suddenly had for her brother was only a means to an end. She didn't realize it until Matthew said, but yes, the biggest thought in her mind when meeting him was the miracle potion. I am such a trashy person. She felt a sense of disgust toward her own behavior. But, is there no chance of redemption? She recalled his parting words and raised her head. Wait. I'm joining. Shouting those words, she chased after him. Excuse me, you do realize this can get you into legal trouble, right? A person covered in black clothes from head to toe asked in a deep voice. I fully understand the risks. Misha nodded. Please let me join. Wait a minute. The guard tapped on his comm and started to verify her documents. Misha waited nervously as she glanced around to find traces of Matthew. Following her repeated requests, he agreed to give her a chance. She followed him all the way from Earth to a space city between Mars and Jupiter. From there, she reached a secret realm. Unlike others, she didn't need to bring in the invitation letter. Matthew directly let her pass. Soon, she found herself in training grounds filled with tens of thousands of members. The secret realm seemed to be recently renovated and the construction of new facilities still seemed to be going on. There are only a few staff. She glanced at the guard evaluating her files. He was a level 7 like her, yet he was doing this menial job. It was most likely due to security reasons. If anything happened, they could immediately control the situation. It's not like they have a choice. Most Shadow Guardians perished on Earth. The ones alive around Earth, like her brother, were captured by the Xanders and only recently released. There are some Guardians that weren't captured. They did all the preparations. Misha knew what this meant. There must be some powerful leader who coordinated this and oversaw things. Was it Enigma, Blue Flash, or perhaps Dreamer? As she wondered, the guard had tapped his comm again and nodded at her. You passed the preliminary. Go in. He pointed to a tall rhombus building a few hundred meters away. Thanks. Next. As the guard yelled, a young man stepped forward and presented his files. Without waiting for the guard to ask, he answered. My parents were killed by the Order. I want revenge. This one is revenge, huh? Misha recalled the common reasons she heard and walked to the building. My parents were killed by the Order. I want to kill the traitors. I can't serve in the army, but I can work part-time as a Shadow Guardian. I can contribute. I want to contribute. I want to contribute. 6 out of 10, the reasons were because they wanted to contribute something, anything. Most of the time, people knew that something was the right thing to do. But they didn't know how to do it. So, they clung to any option they were presented. In this case, Shadow Guardians was the option to justice. Justice brought more than 10,000 people here with utmost secrecy. Misha guessed that there were perhaps dozens of such recruitment spots across the solar system. And she strongly believed that, like in this one, every recruitment spot would have people from all sorts of backgrounds. Young geniuses who wanted to live a meaningful life. Middle-aged experts who were beginning to realize their life had been meaningless. Old veterans who wanted to die a meaningful death. But even getting here is difficult. As she joined the queue in front of the rhombus-shaped building, Misha sighed. She was only able to enter the secret realm because her brother allowed her to. The rest didn't get in. They were selected by Shadow Guardians who were always searching for potential candidates and were invited. Of course, her privilege ended with getting in without an invitation. Whether she'd be selected or not depended on herself. I must. She clenched her fists tightly and advanced in the line. Misha was clear about why she was joining the Shadow Guardians. It was neither for gritty reasons such as revenge. Nor was it for noble reasons such as promoting justice. She simply wanted her son to live a safer life. I won't force him. She took a breath. But I want him to be safe. So, I'll get him the miracle potion. After I die, he can at least protect himself in danger. This wasn't something Matthew could understand. But as a mother, her son's safety was her top priority. Next. The tests begun. To what or whom is your loyalty sworn? What is your cause? Who or what do you fear the most? What or who do you love the most? They were extra careful, in fact, extremely careful to prevent the betrayals. After all, just a few days ago, Rudolph and Xia betrayed Enigma and tried to kill her. Even though no one betrayed the organization itself and stuck to the belief of human freedom, this was a betrayal nonetheless. Even if they knew that betrayals won't happen for that reason again, there was a deep fear in their heart. What if the army decides to attack the Guardians again? What if a sovereign views us as an enemy? The scar in their psyche probably wouldn't fade for a long time. After all, the worst betrayal the Guardians faced didn't come from Rudolph and Xia, but from their comrades in arms, the army itself. As a consequence, the Guardians would move more independently in the future. They wouldn't trust the army like they once did. Next! The guard shouted. Seth adjusted himself in his chair while placing his hands on the table and tapping it lightly. Creak! The doors opened and a woman who seemed to be in her mid-30s entered the meeting hall. Like everyone who came before her, she too passed all the 6 tests and was eligible to take the final one. Miss Misha. A hoarse voice addressed her from the left of Seth. It was Gareth, ex-master of Leon Training Hall. After Seth took the miracle potion, Gareth resigned from his duty and came to protect his old friend during the critical period. As a result, Seth finally reached level 9 in his dual paths. The ex-hall master wanted to leave after Seth was done. But Seth shamelessly had him join the Shadow Guardians and threw a good part of work at him. He was the hall master. I was only an instructor. Surely, his experience is better. Seth justified his actions. All the while, the interview was going on. Your brother informed me that you only wish for the miracle potion for your son. Nothing more, nothing less. Gareth spoke in a commanding tone. Indeed. Misha nodded. Even though she was a level 7, she felt terrible pressure from Gareth. But more than this bald man, the bald man next to him was even scarier. She didn't even dare to lie. What if the enemy offers you the same potion one day? Would you betray us? Seth's interest was piqued as he gazed at the woman once again. A hologram popped up in front of him and showed her information along with her test results. My pupil is too powerful. As he read through every single data about her from the Federation database, Seth praised Varian. After learning that they were starting to recruit, he gave them a few advanced programs that let them break into the Federation's database and check all the data of any person. This genuinely made their lives easier. Even if he's not here, he's doing a lot. Seth clicked his tongue and swiped away the hologram. Tapping his fingers on the table, he repeated the question to Misha, who seemed to be thinking deeply. If someone offered you the same miracle potion, would you betray us? Seth asked, and his aura locked onto her. Misha felt suffocated as her chest grew heavy. In the end, she said through gritted teeth. No, as long as my son's life isn't threatened. Seth smiled and the pressure vanished. Any other answer would have been a lie and she'd be kicked out of her. But since she was honest. Seth and Gareth looked at each other before Seth said. You're in, then. Misha stood up with a bright face, but Seth wasn't done yet. If you bring your son to our secret realm, he'll train here, be protected here, and live here. Seth said in an irrefutable tone. What if I say no? Forget the miracle potion. The consequence is that your son won't be strong like you want him to be. I understand. Misha finally sighed. This was a point of no return. Once her son was here, she'd never be able to betray the Guardians. But as far as she knew and heard, Guardians had some of the best training plans. Perhaps, he'd grow up well. Good. Now, please go to the orientation hall. Seth pointed to another building and the guard called. Next. As Misha left to join the hundreds of members that made it from the tens of thousands, Seth and Gareth continued their work for 2 more hours. In the end, Seth stretched his arms and said, Let's go. They'd be waiting. Son of a bitch. My ass is numb from sitting so much. Gareth cursed without any restraint. Haha. Language, old guy. Seth chuckled and walked to the orientation building. Language is bullshit. When I was hall master, I had to hold myself back all the time. It's torture, I say, torture. Gareth complained as he walked him. Then, his tone turned serious. It's new faces everywhere. Do you think they can do it? Seth's face turned serious. Most of the Guardians died. Now, the only old ones present were the ones that didn't betray Enigma. Compared to the new recruits, they were pitifully low. Gareth was concerned if this would dilute the passion and quality of the Guardians. Don't worry. If anyone slacks off, I'll just beat the shit out of them. Seth grinned as he flexed his level 9 aura. Bah. Let me get the miracle potion, I can also flex on you. Gareth snorted. Good luck with that. I was lucky that I got involved in Cluster City's war, or it'd have taken at least a year to earn it. Your old ass has to wait for a year at least. So what? Once I reach level 9, I'll beat the shit out of that motherfucking abyssal that tried to kill our team. Gareth laughed. Seth suddenly fell silent. Huh? You don't believe I can beat up that shit? Gareth raised a brow. It's not that. Seth said in exasperation. A thought occurred to me, what if there were no abyssals after a year? Pfft. Gareth started laughing on the spot as he slapped Seth on the back. Have you gone crazy from too much work? Seth looked at Gareth and shook his head slowly. Seeing the serious expression on Seth's face, Gareth's smile vanished and he said in a low voice. Why? Seth took a deep breath and said in a tone that had difficulty accepting the reality. Varian. He grows fast, but he can't be a sovereign in a year, okay? You know how long it's been since he awakened, right? More than 2 months, but less than 3 months, I guess. He called me yesterday. And? He said he'll reach level 7 in a week. What? Once Barry is brought here, her connection to light would be gone. She'd live as a shadow from then on. But for how long? At most, 2 years. A voice reverberated in the auditorium, causing the pair of thousand eyes to focus on the stage. A hologram appeared out of nowhere. It was a golden throne filled with white carvings. Like a jewel under the sunlight, it glittered. But more striking than the throne was the man seated on it. Contrary to the Shadow Guardian code, he was in a pure white dress. A brilliant golden mask covered his face except for his eyes. Those eyes glanced at the crowd silently. Heck. It was just short eye contact, but Misha straightened her back. She couldn't explain this feeling, but there was a sense of authority in his gaze. It was like a lion's command over sheep. They were fundamentally on a different level. Misha controlled her pounding heart and focused on Dreamer. At most for 2 years, you guys will give up everything about yourself and fight for our cause, Dreamer said lightly, but his words caused a ripple in the crowd. It began as a little wave, but soon, everyone realized the implications behind his words. And that's why their eyes widened in disbelief and they felt like they were being fooled. How can abyssals be solved in 2 years? An old woman raised her hand and asked. From her unstable aura, Misha was able to infer that she was a level 8. From the same unstable aura, Misha was also sure that this granny was reaching her end. She might survive for 3 more years at most. Nah. Maybe only 2 years. Misha understood the reason for her agitation. I've lived for 120 years. I'll die soon. The old woman looked at Dreamer and said in a plain tone. I want to contribute my life to this cause. Don't insult it with such cheap promises. Her tone was even harsher than her words. Oh. The crowd fell silent as they waited for Dreamer's reaction. While some of them didn't feel or think much about Dreamer's statements, a good portion of them felt offended that he was making light of the situation. Even if humanity grew at the best rate, it'd take at least a decade to overpower the abyssals. But overpowering never meant crushing. Yes, humans would grow stronger than abyssals, but they wouldn't be able to wipe them out without inflicting serious damage on themselves. What was true for abyssals today would be true for humans tomorrow. And if they needed to reach a level where they could crush abyssals without much damage, it'd take a few more decades. Of course, It wasn't like humanity would overpower abyssals in a decade for certain. If they didn't grow fast enough, it'd take longer. But there was another possibility: humanity would be exterminated before it reached that stage. People would have scoffed at the idea a few weeks ago, but after the Uranus cluster conspiracy, they were slapped with a harsh truth that if planned properly, abyssals did indeed have the ability to wipe them all out. That's why no High Awakener was complacent since then. But Dreamer's words sounded exactly like that. And more. They were an insult. Insult? Dreamer repeated his words plainly. You can believe what you want to believe, but in the near future, you'll accept reality. The old woman wanted to refute, but somehow, his words were too confident, like he had already seen the future. His mysteriousness only helped him further as no one tried to refute him any further. Not even the old woman. It isn't like they accepted his words. Misha sighed inwardly. They and me, we all decided to wait and watch. Since those words came from a man who always did the impossible, perhaps. The lights in the auditorium flickered and Dreamer disappeared, leaving behind a few more words. At most is 2 years, but at the latest, it's just 1 year. Wah, everyone gawked at his final words. Either he was trying to fool them or knew something they didn't. If they let him speak here, he's not crazy. As Misha sighed, the auditorium flashed a light once again and another hologram appeared on the stage. A woman in complete black. They could only see her tricolor hair and eyes, but that was enough. Enigma. Everyone in the auditorium, be it a level 5, level 6, or even the level 8, stood up. This was not only a show of apology for humanity's wrongdoings but also a show of respect. Enigma glanced at everyone. Unlike Dreamer, she wasn't commanding. She was merely indifferent and distant. By the end of this year, we'll take back Pluto. Everyone's mind stopped working. At first, they thought they were hearing it wrong. But when Enigma repeated her words again, they could no longer deny reality. Prepare yourself. You might lose your life in the war, but we'll take Pluto back. Enigma declared. Misha, like every other person in the crowd, couldn't believe what she was hearing. Unlike Dreamer's words, which they only decided to observe and didn't take to heart, Enigma's words carried a far heavier weight. Where does her confidence come from? It wasn't just her or the crowd in the secret realm, but across the solar system, shadow guardians, new and old, asked the same question inside their minds. They weren't given answers. Instead, the leaders of the respective secret realms appeared on the stage. And in the secret realm, Misha was in, it was Seth. Let us sweat more during peace to bleed less during the war. Seth raised his arm and roared. Yes. The crowd roared. Riding on the momentum, Seth started the actual orientation. Varian watched the roar of 100,000 thousands of recruits across the holograms. Earlier, they mostly had recruits from Earth and their total numbers barely amounted to 10,000. But now, people from all over the solar system came forward. Julius tried to destroy them, but his actions only made them stronger than ever. He chuckled and said, their cohesion is still weak. Enigma shook her head as she sat at a distance from him. She glanced at his throne and said, you're still using it? Of course. Varian raised his chin proudly. You're still holding on to your childhood dream. Did Sia tell this to you? Varian narrowed his eyes. Enigma remained silent. Whatever, their cohesion is indeed weak. They're newbies after all. Varian shrugged. Then his voice turned serious. But they're dead predecessors and they had one thing in common. Enigma looked at the holograms and took a deep breath. It was evident in their collective voice. Hope. Hope to see a world not plagued by war. Hope to watch the moon without military bases. Hope to live in peace. Thinking back to Julius nearly wiping out the Guardians, Varian mockingly smiled. A verse he read in the past resurfaced in his mind. Throughout history, it was proven again and again, people can be killed, nations can be destroyed, races can be eliminated, but as long as a heart is left beating, hope lives on. A/N, end of arc. We're moving to the 5th volume. Please give feedback on this arc, share what you liked and didn't like, and also, what you expect and would love to see in the next volume. Thank you. Save for their small worlds. Unlike humans who used to only live on Earth, Devas resided not just on planets, but also in small worlds. According to the scientific community, there were at least 10,000 small worlds when Devas perished. These small worlds also slipped away from outer space due to some reason, perhaps lack of aura. As time passed mercilessly, the small worlds began to collapse one by one. Almost 6,000 years after the last Deva's death, there were only a fraction of the small worlds left. But most of them completely lost their special nature and became mere extensions of space and time. These were also known as secret realms by humans. On the other hand, very few secret realms partially retained their Deva characteristics. An example would be the realm used for solar trial. Then, there was another extreme. A small world that lost no or almost no characteristic. Ruins. Varian took in a deep breath as he watched the grand silhouette. A wall of mist circled an area as the walls stretched upward and formed a dome. The area encircled was too small to be a ruin. It wasn't. The area inside contained a huge entrance gate and the white mist was merely isolating it. In other words, it was the entrance to the entrance. Varian took another breath and stepped forward. Beside him, light footsteps sounded as Enigma walked at a distance with a special mask on. They were concealing their identities before entering the ruins. Of course, with the help of Sovereign Irene and the capabilities of Boo, it wasn't hard. What's more, Enigma herself had a lot of experience in sneaking into the ruins. As they approached the mist wall, Varian saw people moving in and out in directed lines. Even though the mist wall's circumference was nothing compared to dungeons, it was still around 20 miles. Thus, an entire division of 10,000 soldiers was deployed to maintain law and order here. So, outside the mist wall itself, there were reinforced walls made with tough alloys, automated weapon systems capable of shooting down even mid-awakeners, and most importantly, some powerful awakeners enough to intimidate any potential troublemaker. Varian and Enigma joined separate queues for the security test. In his opinion, it was already the 35th of Trian, the 3rd month. The secret realm would remain open only for 10 more days. Trian, the 3rd planet, it is also the name of this ruin. Varian clicked his tongue. Ruins were so important that the months were literally named after them. Trian, the 3rd month had 45 days. It meant that the 3rd planet would have its ruin open for 45 days. It's nearly the end of the month. So, only be a few people entering now. Varian frowned. But contrary to his imagination, there were around 2,000 people moving to and fro. 2,000 awakeners might not seem like much, but these 2,000 were all high awakeners. Why are so many entering now? Varian's voice sounded in Enigma's mind. She kept her pace with calm breathing and answered. The big powers enter the ruins right at the beginning. For instance, the prime families, the army, the trade union, and the adventure guild. They are usually the ones who get the best treasures due to their better strength. By now, they'd have already gotten the treasures. But the bigger treasures in the ruins will only start manifesting now. So, these people want to get a slice of the pie and they're ready to fight it out. The major powers would have gotten stronger by now. They should have entered the ruins at the beginning and grew strong with them. Isn't it foolish to fight stronger opponents? Varian frowned. If he was Varian's opponent, then he'd never let him take any treasure. Because once Varian got a treasure, he'd grow stronger in the blink of an eye and overpower him. So, the right strategy should be to fight off these big powers from the start. He was right, but it only applied to himself. It takes anywhere from a few days to even a week for major powers to find suitable treasures. Enigma rolled her eyes and explained. Then what's the problem? Because if any normal person takes those treasures, it takes time for them to digest the treasure and improve. Some treasures can be digested only in a week, but some take months. During this period, awakeners tend to avoid fights. In fact, most of them would prefer entering seclusion. Enigma sighed in the end. So I'm the anomaly here? Varian realized that he was the only one who could improve in a very short time. Enigma didn't answer, but she nodded. The corner of Varian's lips twitched and he turned away from here. It finally made sense why so many were willing to enter the ruins 2 weeks before it closed. Since the big powers got the treasures, a significant portion of their people would either be busy in the ruins assimilating that treasure or would have left the ruins altogether for a safe place. In either case, the overall strength of the major powers would fall. And the best treasures in the ruins will be revealed the closer it is to closing. Varian gulped his saliva. This was truly the best time to hunt for the treasures. Varian looked around and saw that most of the awakeners were either middle-aged or elderly. Of course, the elderly didn't look frail, they were more like grandpas with abs. Grandmas too. And then, there were also young people. They looked to be in their late 20s. Varian took a deep breath as he silently felt their auras. Level 9s, Level 8s, Level 7s. As he was determined that not a single Level 6 was entering, he saw a few teenagers in the line with old men and women. From their gazes and mannerism, he understood that these Level 6s were mostly here to experience the ruins. To afford Level 7 guards, they must be from a big local power. ID. The guard said in a monotonous tone. Varian clicked on his comm and a light shot out from the tall metal wall behind the guard. After a few seconds, the light disappeared and the guard opened his mouth. 100,000 KP. Why, Varian was about to curse, your ass, when Enigma's voice rang in his mind. Don't. Why, yes. Varian tapped on his comm and watched the KP he just acquired from Enigma vanish. So much money. The last time Varian seriously spent money was for a mind checkup to probe his memories. It cost him 300,000 credit points or 300 KP. That was his biggest purchase. Now, he was spending almost 330 times that amount. Fucking hell. As he cursed inside his mind, the metal gate slid down. Here you go. The guard snapped his finger and a bracelet flew towards Varian. Whoosh. It fixed onto his wrist and adjusted its size. Varian walked into the mist. A huge gate taller than a 10-story building, filled with ancient carvings with the writings of mysterious Deva script appeared on this site. Its 2 sides, one for entry and exit each, exuded brilliant lights in a mix of all colors. Varian looked at Enigma in the distance and nodded. Whoosh. Varian's space sense clearly sensed the space. It was like a still lake. Then, ripples began. First, it was a gentle ripple, then it slowly turned forceful and continued until the whole lake was in turbulence. Be careful. Enigma's voice sounded in the end. Don't worry. I will reach level 7 soon. Varian said. There are level 9s in the ruin. Though they won't attack for no reason. Be careful. Itchem. No worries. Even if things go south, I have Boo with me. The Trian ruin was big. According to some estimates, it was as larger than the Earth itself. So, even though there were probably tens of thousands of humans who were in the ruins, he seemed to be stranded in the middle of nowhere. TCH. If the repulsion didn't exist. Varian shook his head. Random teleportation could be overcome if the people who were entering the ruins had body contact. That was how teams entered, and that was also how the so-called young masters and young misses of the elite families were able to have their bodyguards with them. Still, it's not bad this way. Varian smiled. His goal was to find Sia. According to Enigma, Sia would arrive at a special place that'd appear near the end of the 45 days. Almost 2 weeks left. What should I do? Varian's lips curled up. He looked around. Unlike dungeons, the ruins had a certain fullness to it. As if the dungeons were merely an incomplete product while the ruin was a whole. Varian couldn't exactly pinpoint why or how. Perhaps it was the crystal-clear sunlight that came from the solar system's suns that somehow hung in the sky. Or maybe it was the rich and dense aura that was higher than any dungeon Varian ever visited. Or maybe, just maybe, it was a feeling. From deep within, there seemed to be a source telling him that this place was incomparable to the dungeons. I can deal with this later. Varian shook his head and noted his surroundings. He was currently at the edge of a forest. No, to be precise, he was still one step away from the forest. On the other side was a vast plain, and near the horizon, there seemed to be a mountain range. Trees with violet leaves, plain of black soil, mountain ranges in the shape of a snake. Varian's lips twitched and he quickly tapped on the bracelet on his wrist. Wish. A curtain of light popped up in front of him. Violet Woods. The name confirmed his suspicions. Heck. Varian glanced at his foot. It was still one step away from the forest. He couldn't help but sigh in relief. Earth Ruins was, for convenience, divided into 3 areas. Explored, partially explored, and unexplored. Violet Woods was not only explored, it was infamous. Varian clicked on the bracelet once again. Since modern technology was banned in the ruins, humans made a star treasure that was capable of holding information. But that was it. Still, it was better than nothing. Violet Woods, located in the Leos sector. It is home to around 1,000 level 7 cassia trees, a special plant species. These plants look normal and feel normal to an observer. But once you enter the forest, to be precise, once you step in, the nearby trees would morph into their planty form. They would spit poison, attack with dangerous vines, and even coordinate to kill you off. No level 7 has come alive out of this place. P.S. Hiss. Varian stopped reading and carefully took a step away from the forest. Thankfully, I didn't enter. He turned away and with his back to the forest, was about to sprint away. Roar. Following a monstrous roar, the ground shook and the pebbles near Varian shot at him. Whoosh. Whoosh. Varian raised his hand and a lightning wall blocked the stones. Caw. Yet, the mere force with which the pebbles shot at him caused the lightning walls to crack. Roar. The pebbles that were repelled shot again, but in the opposite direction. This. As pebbles combined one after another, a humanoid stone monster 5 meters high was standing in front of him in the blink of an eye. Stone giant. Varian rolled his eyes at the coincidence. P.S. Stone giants tend to rest on the edges of the violet forest. They are very peaceful unless they perceive you to be trying to trespass into the forest. Varian cursed his luck and rolled to the side. Shaw. From the area Varian was previously standing, rock pillars burst out. In fact, they only looked like rock but were as strong as tough metals. Is there a mine underneath? Varian's expression got worse, but he wasn't really anxious. I can fight a level 7 and check my own strength. Right when that thought popped up, his senses screamed at him. Whoosh. Lightning wings unfurled on his back and Varian dashed into the air. Boom. Boom. The ground exploded and from right under Varian, massive and sharp metal spikes shot out. Whoosh. Varian rolled in the air and avoided the metal spikes. Shaw. Air exploded as earth spears condensed from the ground and shot at Varian. They broke the sound barrier and reached him in the blink of an eye. Level 7 is indeed a different range, Varian admitted. His powers, while close to this range, didn't reach there quite yet. But he didn't give up. Varian quickly used his telekinetic, lightning, and space powers to obstruct the earth spears. Space around the spear solidified, an invisible force gripped the spear and a lightning wall blocked the spear's movement. Boom! Huge shockwaves shot out as the earth spears exploded. Space, telekinetic, and lightning forces cracked apart easily and the explosion force reached Varian. As the force just touched Varian, space rippled around his body and he disappeared. Fucking hell. Varian spat out blood as he appeared a few hundred meters away. Even though he only took the partial impact of the strike, it still gave him a minor injury. As if that wasn't enough, after he teleported to another position, Earth spears appeared in front of him in an instant. Boom! Varian tried to block the Earth spears with his powers and teleported again. The Earth spears too exploded again, right before his teleportation. This time, the damage he endured was worse. In a few seconds, Varian was already 3 miles away from the Violet Forest, yet the stone giant kept attacking him. Earth Awakeners were supposed to be on the slower side, but this thing was not only fast, but it was also weird. Whenever Varian was on the verge of escaping, it disintegrated into a pile of stones and rushed towards him. Thus, even with teleportation, Varian failed to escape. But he wasn't intent on escaping either. I can test my limits and then get away with Boo. So, he switched his stance and took the offensive. 3 minutes passed, and Varian tried all the tricks in his arsenal. His offense began as lightning spears, wind-crushing punches, space explosions, vine shoots, mind attacks, and telekinetic blasts. It was single-path attacks first, but he quickly combined them. From 2 paths to 3 paths, his attacks slowly turned more dangerous. But as a price for a battle with level 7, his injuries kept getting worse. Despite that, the cracks on the stone giant, albeit light, gave Varian enough satisfaction. I am weaker than level 7s, but they can't ignore my attacks either. Varian smiled and raised his hand. Whoosh! A metal spear appeared in his hand and he applied the force from his body path strength while also applying the force through his telekinetic path. Simultaneously, he coated the metal spear with lightning and space armor. And then, his mental power shot out and attacked the stone giant's mind. Gray, the earth creature growled but waved its hand. Whoosh! A terrifying earth spear shot at him. Its mere speed caused the air to heat up and the shockwaves from its speed cut apart the ground. But due to his mental interference, the momentum of the earth spear did slow down. Ha! Putting all his strength into the spear, Varian hurled it at the incoming weapon. Boom! The metal spear and the earth spear clashed in midair. Time seemed to still for a second before a huge shockwave enveloped the area. Varian was blown into the sky while the stone giant crashed to the ground from the shockwaves. Cough. Cough. That was a good match. Varian wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. Roar. The stone giant seemed to be enraged as it let out a terrifying roar. Boom. Boom. 2 earth spears shot at Varian. Sorry guy, I had my fun. Gotta go. Varian shrugged and called. Boo, let's go. There was no response. Boo. Emergency. Boo. Boom. Boom.